Good evening. Today is Tuesday, March 11th, 2025, and I'd like to call to order the City Commission work session. And Evan, would you please do the roll call?
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Commissioner Marl?
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Here.
Mayor McGriff?
Present. So tonight we have some items on our work session agenda under general business. And are we having Representative Hartman by, yes, there she is. Sorry, you're still in session. I know you'd rather be here, Representative Hartman. But you have the people's work to do, so that's important. So we have a legislative update from Representative Vanessa Hartman, District 40. Please, whenever you're ready.
Thank you all. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, it's going to show my face. Wow. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be there with you all. I have a 6:30 p.m. meeting to go to. But thanks for giving me the opportunity to share just a quick little legislative update. We did this last long session, and after speaking to some of you, it was well received and wanted to keep with that tradition. Do I have share screen? Yes, I do.
The master of the share screen is available.
Can everyone see that all right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, now I have to figure out how to do this. Okay, here we go. So this is just a brief overview of what we'll cover. We'll just jump right in. We don't have to read this. So for this legislative session, I just wanted to point out some of the key issues that we're discussing throughout the building. There's federal uncertainty in terms of funding and certain grant programs. We're continuing to keep track of that and how that might impact us in the future. The updates are on a daily basis. Obviously, as you all well know, we have a big transportation package to discuss this year, and I will touch a little bit on that later around what I am hearing and what the path forward sounds like it's going to be. Housing production, continuing with that work and reducing barriers to building. And then also overall, a big portion of the work that we're doing here is reducing cost of living and addressing those in a number of ways. Just a little bit of tidbits with numbers. Last short session, there were 291 bills that were submitted, with 115 sent to the governor's desk. This session, we've had 2,551 bills filed, and I promise you only 27 of those are by me. And then we also, each of us as usual, have 5 priority bills that we can utilize if something of urgent need comes up. Oh, I'm clicking the wrong one. Yeah. Okay. So in the way of the transportation package, just as a small reminder for those, I do not sit on this committee, nor do I sit on the subcommittee. So we track it as much as we can and rely on those of us that have similar viewpoints that are sitting on that committee to kind of get updates of what's going on. So when speaking with the chair, the main focus for this transportation package is stabilizing the funding for maintenance, operation, and safety, as well as prioritizing unfinished projects that were promised in House Bill 2017. Back in the 2017 legislature. They will commit to prioritizing those projects that have not been completed and that have received already other state and federal funds. Some of the funding streams, as we all have heard time and time again, gas tax is declining, cost of construction and maintenance is rising. So the committee is considering all options for transportation funding, is my understanding. With that being said, my office, as usual, is always going to be fighting against tolling and the implementation of tolling and calling for a comprehensive audit of ODOT. You'll see we referenced Senate bill and House bill numbers that we have been working with in tandem with Senator Meek and others in the Clackamas caucus, and to continue to advocate for that comprehensive audit and fighting against the utilization of tolling, specifically on the Abernathy Bridge. We will, and we have been having conversations about advocating for that additional lane that was promised to us to address that I-205 bottleneck. For this session, I have been named the chair of the House Early Childhood and Human Services Committee, which is a new role for me, which is very exciting. We've got a lot going on that oversees quite a bit of different agency needs. Really focusing in on what we call ERDC, employment-related daycare. There is an extensive wait list, and so figuring out what sort of infrastructure needs do we need to help to fix that wait list. We have about 4,000 families that have been approved for this employment-related daycare stipend and have not been able to be connected to a child care provider. So we're going to be focusing really on how do we improve those connections with parents and child care providers. One part that I'm very excited for, because I think this is my city council nerd brain, is eliminating barriers for child care facilities. From the 2023 legislative session, we directed the department, a DLCD, to recommend and study what sort of barriers cities and counties might face with zoning recommendations for siting child care facilities. And instead of mandating those zoning recommendations, the goal is to create a handout and sort of streamline that process. And then eventually, hopefully, when the funding picture is a little better, we can provide financial support for those cities to help update those zoning recommendations to help site child care facilities a little faster. Then on the human services realm, there wasn't enough bullet points and page length to kind of talk about the overall scope of what we're trying to work on. But some of the highlights really surround youth experiencing homelessness, improving and increasing the quality of our child welfare and foster care system, and really focusing in on our community members that live with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It is an area within DHS that has not gotten a ton of spotlight on the program, but we continue to see a decrease in workforce. We continue to see facilities closing. And so we are going to bring this discussion back to the forefront and how we can support those living with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or IDD. So much more to come on that work. Next, I just wanted to touch on a little bit of personal bills that I've been working on. As some of you know, we do quite a lot of work in the domestic violence, sexual assault, or survivor victim work. And this year is no different. We have a slew of bills that have had public hearings already on them, and some that are still waiting to get confirmation and still working through some of those technical fixes. But I won't read this in detail so we can have time for questions. But these are just some of the priority bills that we have we've been working with some others in the building. We have been working in partnership with a couple other legislators who are taking the lead on utility rate increases and making sure that the Public Utility Commission has those authority to review any major rate hikes, and those conversations are ongoing. I know that there's been a lot of discussion around how we can partner, give the PUC tools, but also make sure that our voices are still being heard in the process, because it's no secret to any of us sitting in this space how often and how high these rate increases have been.
Representative Hartman,
Yeah.
what is there a definition for major? What's a major rate increase?
That is a great question, and I do believe that the conversations that have been had are to define what that means.
Okay.
I think that there's a lot of folks who have different viewpoints around like year over year versus, can't go above 10%, can't, go above 20% over the course of this X many years. And so those are part of the discussions and negotiations that are still having. But if we get we can follow up with the bill sponsors and see if there's any more leeway with that. And thank you. I can't see any of you, so if there are questions in between, I've got only 2 more slides, and then we can jump up. But the last one I wanted to touch on, because I do believe that both Gladstone and Oregon City, in some form or fashion, participated in the Low-Income Water Ratepayer Assistance Program, which was a federal program.
Yes.
That folks could apply to have assistance with water shutoffs. So this House Bill 3527, that federal program, it has ended. And so this would create a similar state-funded LIWAP, is what we call it, Low-Income Water Ratepayer Assistance Program, to help continue to serve those really, really low-income folks who need to make sure that they can keep their water going, and then our water utilities can then get paid through the state funding program. So we've had the hearing on that. Hopefully we'll have a work session soon, and more to come on that as well. And the last thing I wanted to touch on, what we've been working with a bunch of stakeholders, is really our proactive state plan to prepare for our growing elder population. This particular bill, House Bill 3497, will force agency and industry leaders to sit down at the table and acknowledge that in 10 years we will have more people over the age of 65 than we do any other generation. And so we are at this moment we don't have the capacity to handle those that need services now. And so the hope is the one task force and study bill I will support wholeheartedly is one that makes us proactive. And so we will be having a hearing on that next week and seeing how that progresses through the session. Let me see, where am I? Okay. 2 more. This, again, I know some have been involved in these discussions. We are bringing back the SDC deferral. That was the allowing payment up to 180 days after the certificate of occupancy. This bill died in the last long session, I believe. But Representative Gamba is the lead on this bill and has been working closely with the governor's office to move this across the finish line so that it can help cities and developers with the SDC costs. The squatter eviction fix, this is to close a loophole that has allowed squatters to stay in properties longer that don't have that tenant-landlord relationship. I can answer questions on that. I just want to brief because I'm being mindful of time. And then also the other one in relation to development is allowing churches to develop housing. Again, this is another bill that unfortunately died in the long session. I believe Representative Gamba is also taking the lead on this as he did last time, but we heard from a lot of folks within the district and in around the county, churches that have larger properties that are looking to either build smaller cluster homes and just be able to do that, and they are unfortunately unable to. So more to come on that. So as usual, always working on safeguarding our water, protecting our agricultural land. So these are just some of the House bills that we have been working on and Senate bills that we have been working on, really addressing the groundwater. Representatives Helm and Owens, both co-chairs of the House Ag and everything else is what we call it, committee, have been working on water packages for the past several sessions and will continue to do so and lead that work and really moving us into the future where we streamline almost everything. We are really stuck in the 1970s, as I have been told, when it comes to our processes. And so they're really hoping to really move this groundwater and addressing those sources of pathways and contamination forward this session. It's something that was left off in the last couple of sessions. So way more to come on that, but expect a giant water package to come out of that committee that addresses a lot of different areas. We specifically, my office is taking the lead on that far right column, the safe drinking water for all. It's just access to drinking water and testing, and really codifies the transparency that an agency must do when testing for water, and as well as landlords transparency to their tenants on the water testing results. And lastly, we want to just touch on our funding priorities that we will be submitting. Some of you may be familiar with the top three, but the Highway 213 and Beaver Creek Road. Thank you so much for filling out those or giving us these ideas of the need for these, and then addressing water as usual. And then our last funding priority will really be to make sure that we're addressing the federal cut in the Victims of Crime, or VOCA, funding that prevents loss to victims services. And so I'm sure you all are familiar that we in Oregon City, we have a safe place. We have our district attorney victim assistance programs. We have one of the few shelters. And so we're really making sure that we are able to see what is coming down in the way of potential federal cuts, and making sure that we're keeping those really, really important services available to our community. And that, I believe, it leads me to my question slide.
So, gentlemen, any questions?
Yeah.
I guess just at least one that stuck out to me. So Representative Gamba, Mark is proposing 2964. I think that's a problem that we don't need. It's not a problem that we're trying to solve. With the new mid-level housing and all the new housing rules, they can build that right now. Why are we trying to fix something that ain't broken?
So 2964 is the SDC
No,
loan
that's-
fund.
Well, allowing churches to develop housing on their land, I don't see that that's a problem.
It's the churches.
Sorry, I'm listening to Daniel.
That's okay.
Oh, the
Hi,
church
Daniel.
bill, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, I did forget to introduce my team.
Hello, Ma'am
Chief of
McGriff.
Staff, Daniel, and Kavi is our legislative aide this session. So what were you saying? So 29, sorry, I think I was looking up the wrong one.
Yeah, it's the bill. It gives grant money to help.
Allowing churches to build on their land. Most churches in our area are on
Oh,
land that allows for housing. And like I said, I'm not sure we have a problem there.
Yeah, so it may not be so much of an Oregon City thing. There are a few churches in unincorporated Clackamas County that are a part of the group of stakeholders that have brought this to Representative Gamba. And it may have changed as it's gone through the legislative process, because now I see that it's awarding the grants for those pre-development costs. So let me double check in with him and see if there's any significant changes on that. But I had toured 2 different churches that are in unincorporated Clackamas County where they were reaching some barriers.
Okay, well, I can understand that because we don't want to encourage development on properties outside of cities' boundaries and UGBs where services aren't available. So I will write to Mr. Gamba myself and try to understand why we would promote urban levels of development out in an area where services are not available. We do not want to have units on septic tanks. Cities
Right.
are not going to serve outside of UGBs. And so, churches are a conditional use out there on some of that, farmland or forest land, hopefully not, but, rural residential. I'll check in with him. This is not an Oregon City issue. This is a land use planning issue for me personally. So I will check in with him.
I'm sure he would appreciate your
I'm
expertise.
sure he won't. When I tell him that this is dumb. So anyway, it's not dumb, but yeah, we have a problem. We have a
You
problem.
tell him that I sent you there, and then
Okay,
he'll really...
all right. I'll tell him I'm on a mission now. Okay, I'm on a mission. Anything else stand out to other people? I think the question I had about, what is considered a major rate increase, I think that's critical to many of our residents. The utilities could say, oh, well, you've given 10%, we're going to do 9.5, so it's always under, it always would be under the, the threshold. So, but what's major to one person is maybe not major to another person.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we'll definitely circle back.
Anything else? I think all the work that you're doing to assist us on some of those funding priorities, be nice if we could have our friends at Clackamas County step up on Beaver Creek Road 213, but we're getting there. We're getting there. We're gonna have some more conversations.
Yes.
We're gonna come with our hand out. So this
Yes.
is really to help them, not us. So we appreciate.
I will use my hand also.
Yes. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you so much for everything that you do for District 40. We appreciate you very much. And we know
Yes.
that you'd rather be home.
Well, thank you all for having me. I'm sorry I couldn't share space with you, but if anything does come up or you're hearing anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you all for all that you do for our community.
Thank you so much. All right. So, fun times down there, right, Adam? No, not fun. Okay. Well, I was trying to be, trying to make it sound more enjoyable than it is, actually. One of my favorite topics, climate-friendly, equitable communities, conceptual report. We get all the fun.
All right, thank you, Mayor McGriff and City Commissioners. This is Brian Davis. He's our consultant who's been helping us with climate-friendly, equitable communities. And so he's going to walk you through a presentation, but I just wanted to kind of recap where we've been. So we came to you a year ago, actually a little more than a year ago, because it was January of '24, and kind of presented what this is and then asked for your direction. There are three options that are available in this, in CFEC. And so one of them is either eliminating parking minimums altogether. The option two required something called unbundling. And to me, it was not really a workable land use decision. Unbundling meant that the city would have to ensure that developers and landlords were charging for space separately from parking. And so we didn't want to get into managing leases. And so option three gave us some room to make some decisions. We're not eliminating minimums throughout the city. Minimums will be eliminated in the transit buffer. But with that, we have some other code that we have to implement and choices to make. So since we were here last, we applied for a grant. We're awarded the grant, and DLCD hired Brian for us. And we started in the fall, and we had a couple of meetings with an ad hoc advisory group to give feedback on the very few areas where we can make some decisions. And then January, February, we did our public outreach. And so what we're here tonight to present is the results of that, and also what we have to do. But we have choices. We asked the public for feedback where we had choices, and then there's a number of things that we have to do. So I will turn it over to Brian.
Is there an option 4?
No,
Okay, well, we might be coming up with one.
there's not really room to stray.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, so thanks, Aquila. So yeah, we just kind of wanted to circle back with you. This is my first time talking to you, but it sounds like you are pretty well versed on the goings on of CFEC and the state imposed requirements there. So yeah, we have, again, a lot of it is fairly prescriptive, but there are several elements where we have latitude to kind of make decisions about specifically the design of parking areas and some of the various implementations of regulations and that sort of thing. And we took the outreach process for that really pretty seriously and got as much feedback and cast as wide a net as possible to make sure that folks who had opinions on this were getting their perspectives heard. So yeah, over the course of January and February, we spoke to all of the various standing commissions, like Aquila said, the ad hoc advisory committee that we formed specifically to inform these efforts. And we think, and you know, again, the flavor of what we received is not, you know, yay, let's all go, you know, send flowers to Salem for making us do this. But we think we have an approach here that we can live with that's going to be good for Oregon City in terms of, you know, inspiring, creating this sorts of development patterns that you want to the extent allowed within the new CFEC rules. And I also want to point out here, and sometimes it goes without saying, but by eliminating minimum parking requirements as you are required to do within half a mile of the Line 33 route and within a quarter mile of the climate-friendly area that's downtown Oregon City, that is not the same thing as saying no parking is going to be built. It's just saying that no parking is required to be built. What we're seeing quite a lot of times is in areas where where people could legitimately live or work or run a business without a car, your downtown Portlands of the world and the Eugenes, the suburbs that maybe are a little bit more transit accessible in downtown than Oregon City is. In those situations, yeah, you're seeing sometimes parking being underbuilt relative to what the requirements used to be. But by and large, in the areas where people, do need a car to live and work and live their lives, the market is kind of keeping up with that, and there is an adequate amount of parking that seems to be getting built. And to take it one step further, a lot of times it's fairly difficult to get funding for any project where the lenders don't think it's going to be, where you're not going to be able to successfully sell off the homes or run the business or whatever. So, sort of like everything else in the great American experiment, at least historically, how much do we want to regulate versus how much do we want to let the free market decide? And in this case, with parking, it's always ironic. People that are left on other things tend to be right on parking and vice versa. And in this case, the state of Oregon, which is normally a fairly left of center institution, is taking a fairly right of center approach and allowing the free market to dictate what's going on in areas where parking minimums are removed, which, again, you're not required to do for the entire city, and you're not, but you are doing that for within the transit buffer, which is, as you can see from the map, fairly significant piece of the city. So I'll get off the soapbox there and kind of describe the rest of the approach here. Option 3 essentially requires you to eliminate those minimums. You are required to do some maximums within that buffer as well. By and large, your maximums already comply with the requirements. Just some multifamily maximums will need to be tweaked. You are required to do it within the buffer because it's a relatively small adjustment. The Planning Commission and the members of the public we heard from think it should just be done citywide to simplify the development code generally. There are a number of uses, as the representative talked about, things like supportive housing and childcare. Those are the sorts of uses that under CFEC they prioritize as, uses that are important to the equity of the community, and those are required to not, you are required not to have parking mandates for those. I wish we had another word for require, because the state's requiring you to require things or not require things. It gets confusing. I apologize preemptively if I word salad too much. Then there's also some bike parking requirements. By and large, you comply with those. Some requirements in terms of supplying electricity for 40% or more of parking spaces in residential situations with more than 5 units.
Stop a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you talking about charging?
Excellent question. Yes.
I don't know when you say electricity, I'm assuming a residential development will have electricity.
Yeah.
So what is the specific requirement?
The way the requirement is worded, you have to provide conduit that allows for up to 40% of the spaces that are built to have a level 2 EV charger. And luckily, you have a really good planning commission on that who kind of nerded out a little bit last night about what all of this means and how to word that in a way that just, kind of sustainably requires the EV development to, be believably adequate to provide this sort of power. But the way the state law requires it is conduit for a level 2 EV charging station, level 2 being 240 volt as opposed to 110. Does that answer your question, Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. So this is by and large, the conceptual approach that we're going with here. I have the next several slides are a number of the specific things that we covered during our outreach process, kind of the key decisions that the city needs to make in implementation of CFEC. So we're going to walk you through what those are and what we heard. But any questions about this or the approach generally? So key pieces here, and again, the next several slides are not sort of the exhaustive list of the requirements under CFEC. That is in the conceptual report that's included in your packet. These are just sort of the high points from the outreach process. Yeah, one of the requirements there, you need to allow for the redevelopment of underused spaces into things that are supportive of transit uses or bike parking, or, you know, things like street seats for restaurant or those sorts of things. There was, so a key thing that we heard during the outreach process is, okay, great, we support this, but what does underused mean? And how do we ensure this is only happening with parking that is legitimately underused? There's not a ton of leverage that you have based on the way the rules are making to ensure that that's the case, but we can put in some definitions for underused, and you're obviously, anything that does get done there is subject to the other requirements within your development code. Please.
So what, redeveloped for other purposes? Could a building be built on part of it?
No, yeah, so the way, and I would have to go back and look at how not only the rule is written, but the implementation guidance, but they're pretty restrictive there in what you can do and can't do.
Okay, so it's more like what, you know, bike parking, outdoor parking, but you couldn't develop it with another building?
Exactly. Well, in areas where the parking is required. So in the transit buffer area, if there's no minimum there, and I had, you know, a restaurant and a parking lot with 10 spaces, I could then come in and say, okay, I'm developing that 10 spaces into an additional restaurant, but that would have to go through your normal land use process there. You just wouldn't be able to preclude that or forbid that development because of the parking requirement within the transit buffer. Outside of the transit buffer, yeah, you could not just come in and go beyond or go below your required minimums with additional development or whatever. There just has to be a provision in the code where you can do that if the space is underused. Now, again, that's the implementation guidance does sort of specifically say we recommend allowing, you know, people to interpret underused based on their own needs or whatever. The ideal being, you know, business owners not going to shoot themselves in the foot by taking away their own parking space if it's needed. But I think it's probably pretty unlikely that too much is ever going to get done here. We're talking about, you know, a parking space or two in big lots that might get converted to bike parking or street seating and that sort of thing.
Well, then why do we have to put it in if we don't think it's going to be utilized?
So we have to allow for it. The OAR does, I think, call out structure expansion as well.
I am. And that's sort of the meta question too. Why do you have to remove your minimums when we think there's still going to be parking that's built? To similar thing. Where, again, you know, and DLCD obviously is looking at parking less from a transportation perspective there, more from a land use perspective. And we're not trying to take away parking that is needed or that is, you know, supporting housing, that's supporting the economy, that's supporting businesses. What we're trying to do here is ideally develop the parking that is not needed, the parking that sits empty the vast majority of the time, keep that from being developed if it's not already developed, and where it is, converting some of that to higher and better uses. So that's specifically what we're after here, and it's exactly why we're, you know, writing code provisions around edge cases here. The edge cases are sort of the parking, the 9th and 10th spaces in a parking lot that typical demand is 5 or 6. So that's kind of the target here. And again, that's, you know, I think everyone from the state on down to me is fully aware of the possibilities that this could be abused, but again, I think we're talking about edge cases there. Yeah.
So in order to determine whether a lot is underused, and I see the definition there, parking lots or facilities that are below 50% of capacity most or all of the time, do these entities or these businesses who are seeking changes have to hire someone to complete a study? How do they determine that?
No, yeah. So they basically get to say, yeah, this is underused, we're going to develop it. We asked DLCD specifically if that was allowed, and they said it would be tantamount to a parking regulation. Now, again, in areas where you have your parking minimums, they're not allowed to go below the parking minimums to do this. You could still enforce those, so if they're required to have 10 spaces, they have 10 and they want to take away one to do street seating, at that point you could require a study or a land use process or whatever. But in the areas where there is developed parking but no more minimums, that's where, that's where the city doesn't have a ton of leverage there to preclude that development.
That's where you take them at their word?
What's that?
That's where you take them at their word?
Yeah, that's where the
Okay.
business owners, you're essentially having faith there that they're not going to redevelop a spot that's needed. Now, so the other piece of this, and I want to make sure we're going kind of fast here, but these are, complex images, and it's, a lot of, this thing is going to have a lot of downstream effects, right? And I don't think that anyone would argue that the impacts of CFEC ultimately will not result in more demand for parking in public lots and on the street and public facilities. I would also argue that that's a good thing, could be a stream of revenue for the city, particularly in downtown where you are metering and you do have permits. But yeah, also part of option 3, and one of the reasons that Oregon City, city staff in particular, are attracted to the idea of option 3, it does require some level of management to deal with sort of the inevitable increase in demand on the public facilities, the streets and public lots, and Oregon City has what is required in place already. And I think you're also in the process of going through another parking study downtown and those sorts of things. So essentially, that's what the state is trying to encourage you to do here is require less, much, all, some, who knows. That's something reasonable people can and do and have been arguing about. Some of that parking is going to get built anyway because the invisible hand kind of demands it. Some of that parking is not going to get built. That will impact the public facilities, and that's okay, and it's healthy, and it's part of a good, thriving urban environment. We just need to manage that parking smartly, and if we do so, you could even, have another source of revenue there to do things, add improvements downtown. So that's sort of the big picture. Kind of going on down. This is an important one, and one that we had a lot of conversations about. When we do develop parking, we want it to look nice and be as environmentally friendly as essentially asphalt, but striping could possibly be. The way the state wants you to do that is one of 3 options: either a tree canopy meeting certain requirements, installation of solar panels proportional to the size of the lot meeting certain requirements, or implementation of a fee in lieu program. A lot of our outreach focused on which of these to pursue, how to implement that. At the end of the day, we decided a fee in lieu is not in the best interest of Oregon City. It's problematic to implement, and you would not be guaranteed to have any of the money back that you paid into it. There was interest in solar panels, but there was a preference for tree canopies and tree preservation specifically. So what we did in the development code there is worded it to require the tree canopy. Your tree canopy rules in the development code were already pretty robust and largely complied with the new requirements. We just have to put in the 40% coverage at maturity specification. I think that's literally the only thing we had to change to get that into compliance. And then there is a clause there that indicates that you may pursue solar in addition to or in lieu of the tree canopy if, and the burden remains on the applicant for this, if they can show that the site constraints preclude the development of the tree canopy according to CFAC rules.
What's the solar for? A building?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would have to look at that. I don't actually know how that would tie into the grid, if that's just going right to their building or if that's going into the public grid or not. I'm not sure if there's, rules or implementation guidance on it, but I could certainly look into that and get back to you. So we talked a little bit about this electric vehicle charging. How do we want to implement that? Do we want to go with the 40% requirement? Do we want to increase that? There was, and your planning commission has some EV enthusiasts. There was a lot of interest there in, what can we do to maximize the uptake of EVs, but still have the least burden, the least regulatory burden on developers as possible. At the end of the day, we decided that it was probably in the best interest just to keep to the 40% minimum requirement. So we'll require that, again, that's a requirement to provide conduit for level 2 EV charging. A lot of folks were very adamant that we want to word that in a way to ensure that, it's prohibited for wires or other things to be strung over sidewalks or pedestrian pathways or anything else that would inhibit the walking environment. So working on code language to do that for you. There's a requirement to provide parking for bicycles and small-scale mobility devices at various destinations that are defined by the code and within the climate-friendly area. We did do some outreach on this. A lot of this can be punted to your TSP update, which is next year.
I'm not sure.
An
at this
upcoming
point.
TSP update can address the sort of on-street requirements of that, things you're required to do in your right-of-way in terms of providing parking for bikes, scooters, those sorts of things. In the development code, the bike parking was, I think, almost entirely or mostly up to date in compliance with the CFAC requirements. There are a couple little things, little use considerations and those sorts of things we have to update for clarity, but by and large, fairly minor updates here to come into compliance, but there are going to be some things that you have to think about come TSP update in terms of on-street parking within the climate-friendly area downtown in particular.
Before you leave that,
Yeah.
that is all well and good, but our downtown sidewalks are already constrained. There isn't room for what's there now. Some of the businesses have tables out there. There's no room for cargo bikes or anything. I mean, you're talking about creating a situation where somebody in a mobility device isn't actually going to be able to get through there. They're having problems with it now.
Yeah, I think the bike parking that they're envisioning there, and I'm not 100% certain, you may be able to address that with, the staples on the sidewalk or whatever, but I know you are allowed to, and I think they're contemplating specifically their, bike corrals in the street or scooter corrals or those sorts of things.
Yeah, unfortunately, most people that I know that actually do ride bikes in this area, they want their bike located somewhere near where they are, which is, I have to get crabby with people sometimes, say, please don't attach your bike to a tree.
Yeah.
So we probably need to have some bike facilities that are in between where maybe a planter box is or something like that that's near a business, but that's, the business, I think, is going to have to request it. It's not something the city is obligated or has the funds to go putting bike parking facilities all over the place. There's some businesses that I think, for instance, like White Rabbit, they could use one. Whether they can afford to get one to put in, that would be another story. There are people that do bike there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, and again, I haven't dived dove in, I don't know the past tense of dive, too deep into this, because again, a lot of it can be, a TSP sort of thing, but I think you will, and I agree wholeheartedly that, you want to make sure people have a place to park that's convenient and lit and visible and safe and it's organized, so ideally covered maybe. But at the same time, you want to make sure that bikes and pedestrians are coexisting, and especially with scooters. I don't know, haven't spent enough time downtown yet to know if it's as big a problem here as it is in Portland, but.
We don't allow scooters right now.
What's that?
There's no scooters downtown.
So if and when that comes, it's going to be important for you to make sure that there are some spaces to store those, because otherwise they get left in the middle of the pedestrian pathways. And so, it's one of those, planning cities is hard, and as we want to encourage all of these, alternative modes of transportation to the extent we can, but, it's pretty hard to do that in a way that preserves access for, specifically on the sidewalks for pedestrians and those sorts of things. So, again, conversation that, that you have to have when you go do the TSP. For now, the development code is relatively minimal, but things to think about for the next kind of round of this. So I think I only have one or two more here. So cities over 25,000, we touched on this. You have to implement parking maximums within the same area that we showed on the previous map, the transit buffer and the climate-friendly area and the buffer around that. Metro relatively recently required uptake of parking maximums that are mostly consistent with the new rules. The only thing we identified where Oregon City will need to adjust this are the maximum requirements around multifamily parking. So those will need to be tweaked a little bit. I think right now you have a maximum of 2.5 for all multifamily per unit. That may depend on unit size. I'm not 100% certain. The requirement is 1.2 per studio, 2 per non-studio. So we are recommending that you add that. Again, this key thing where you can make a decision. Do you want to just implement that within the required area, which is the line 33 buffer and the climate-friendly area, or do you want to do that citywide? Again, because it's a relatively small adjustment to one use, the feedback we've heard so far is let's just do it citywide, but that's something where, as the ultimate deciders, you can go with or change. So we got some feedback from the Planning Commission last night. They want us to look at possible incentives to charge or to provide more charging capacity. They don't want to require it outright, but if we can incentivize going above and beyond the minimum that they're required to free EV parking, that would be great. Among the Planning Commission in particular, they were concerned about a lack of requirements for residential uses within that zone and wanted to look at ways that could potentially be used to encourage EV parking in particular, because that's one way to guarantee that we are getting a parking space is if we build an EV parking space. They were in broad agreement that a fee in lieu option is a bad idea for Oregon City. So again, we're pretty adamant about that, but you guys ultimately decide. So let us know if you are not in agreement. We really wanted to make sure, again, this is something I mentioned, we're prioritizing trees and we're prioritizing the right kind of trees, native species. The right tree for the right place is the phrase the commissioner who brought up that concern used. I agree wholeheartedly with it. So we're trying, I think, as much as we can to make sure those work for a few people who are more interested in code than arborists. So, lastly, we want to make sure we have a definition for level 2 electric vehicle charging stations so that when developers are putting these in, they're not guessing about things like, wire sizes or capacities or that sort of thing.
Before you move on from that,
Please.
on that right tree, right place, I live a couple of blocks away from a new, large apartment complex. And I intentionally walked the dog through there today, through the parking lot. And we have a sad history of requiring tree plantings and then the trees shove up the sidewalk. And as I walked that parking lot, the dividers between the spaces is 8 spaces and then you have to have a strip? Is that what or something like that?
Sounds right,
Too
yeah.
small.
Whatever, there's some number and you have to have a strip. In this lot, the strips are about 2.5, 3 feet wide. And that's what was shoving up all the trees. So I can just see us, we're gonna buy ourselves another problem. Instead of shoving up sidewalks, we're gonna be shoving up parking lots.
Yeah, that's well taken, and I can tell you that, cities around the state are trying to figure out how to implement this in a way that, 40% canopy of maturity, so how big do the wells need to be to accommodate that? The best idea I've heard, and I think what we're currently recommending for Oregon City, is to adopt a list of trees, and presumably that would, and you could have your well size requirements and those sorts of things that are adopted too. And I'm not sure if we have definitive language yet on how we're structuring that or whatever. Obviously, plenty of opportunity at this point if you want to recommend something to have that implemented. But yeah, the point is well taken, and I do think it's important to make sure the tree well sizes and the tree species and those sorts of things, right tree, right place, they all kind of make sense together and are, they're doing what you want to the parking lot, which is providing a canopy at the same time as not ruining the pavement or whatever.
Is that at the mill at Maple? See, that should have been caught in design review.
Well, there are trees in those strips, but
They're not wide enough.
they're never gonna get to the point they cover 40%.
No.
Never gonna have that much coverage.
We don't have that regulation right now.
Right, but what I'm saying is, in order to get the same number of spaces, we're probably gonna take up a lot more ground. But maybe that's okay because it's gonna be nice and tree covered, I don't know. But parking lots, the way they look today, aren't gonna hit. There's no way you could cover 40%.
Right.
Any thoughts, Scott or Adam?
So this is pretty well known by now, but I have a really hard time with the EV mandates. So electric vehicle charging required for 40% of parking spaces at new multi-unit residential developments. I can just see a prospective affordable housing developer wanting to develop and then looking at these requirements and thinking, oh, this is exactly what my clientele is going to need, is EV charging spaces. I have a really hard time with that. I have a really hard time with the fact that we can't really have any requirements for affordable housing, period. And so, and then it was also mentioned the childcare facilities. So all of the moms and dads are going to be walking their children to childcare and then walking to work, because we have plenty of those opportunities in Oregon City for that to happen. So going back to conversations we've had in the past, I think we all want a more walkable community. And if we could go back and redesign this entire city to make it that way, I think we would. But given the built environment, it's so difficult for me to see how this is actually going to help. And I also think that there's some dissonance coming from our state, because they're trying to say we need more affordable housing, we need to make it easier for developers, we need to streamline the process, but then they're also trying to do this. So clearly we have to make some decisions, and we're gonna have to make decisions that are best tailored to fit our needs, but I just wanted to get those concerns on the record, recognizing that that's not something that you can change. So, thank you.
Scott?
So I had a quick question regarding the electric vehicle charging. So if I heard you correctly, it requires the installation of conduit, correct?
Correct.
There's no actual requirement to build the
Okay.
charger itself, it just says, hey, you have to. So
So who's building it then?
that's what I'm asking. So the developer has to come in and say, okay, we got to put in the conduit, we've got it for the spaces, and then it could just do nothing. Is that correct?
Correct. And the,
So it would be a
This is-
different private company.
Sure,
with a charger.
but if the property owner, for example, just didn't want to, they wouldn't have to.
Put the charger in?
Yeah.
Right, sure.
They can put the
Okay.
conduit in and.
They could put the conduit and just
So
like
what?
cap it, close it, and say, okay, we're not even going to do anything with this. If they wanted.
That's as far as the requirement goes, yeah.
Okay.
It's just laying the conduit. Yeah.
Thank you, I just wanted clarification on that.
I think
no
this
sense.
has come up before because folks have said it makes no sense. I think the reason they did it is because at the time these rules were getting rewritten, there were, and I mentioned this to your planning commission, and I would probably defer to them because there were a couple commissioners that knew exactly what the varying standards were and explained it to me. But there were, at the time these rules were written, like a couple competing standards, like a beta and a VHS of EV charging standards. And I think the state wanted to require the ability to eventually go with either of those or a third charging standard if that went out or whatever, without, weighing in on the debate or predicting an ultimate winner or that sort of thing. And, again, EV charging infrastructure is a little bit above, out of my wheelhouse, but my understanding is that this is the way that they figured they could word it and have it be most applicable to any kind of charger that would come along later. Have the conduit there and, you could stick whatever plug in there that whatever the market has decided on by the time the construction goes in. So,
Rocky? That's not worth even commenting on. Okay, well, sorry, I have a list of some questions.
I have a couple.
Go right
You want to go
ahead.
now, or?
Go right ahead. I'm kind of feeling verklempt at the moment.
So I'm looking at the, one of the documents that we were provided, the conceptual approach to compliance. And there's a chart on page 9 that I got a couple of questions about. And one of them says, the section is on reducing the burden of parking mandates. And it says, required parking spaces may be provided off-site within 2,000 feet pedestrian travel of a site. So is that a typo, or are we saying that you could have the off-street parking almost half a mile away from the development?
I don't think it's a typo.
You just need
Okay.
a trailer to
That
like
makes
get all your
no
stuff
sense.
with you to.
Okay. And that same chart, walk me through this, maybe I'm missing something. So, it says parking mandates shall be reduced by 2 off-street parking spaces for every electric vehicle charging station provided in a development. So if I'm outside the half-mile buffer and I build multifamily, our minimum is 1 space per unit, right? Outside the buffer?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to build 24 apartments. So I'd have to put in 24 parking spaces. But if I put in 8 EV charging spaces, I can reduce the total number of spaces by 2 for every one. 8 times 2 is 16. So instead of building 24 spaces, I could build 8 spaces that are EV charger? Or am I misinterpreting that somehow?
yeah, that's, I think that's my understanding of it as well. 1 off-street park, 2 off-street parking spaces for every EV charging station provided in the development.
And how much does an EV charging station cost versus the cost of a
Well,
parking space?
And
Well, I
again,
don't
is
think
this,
it- I
is this
don't
just
think it-
putting in the conduit or that has to be a functional charging station?
charging station.
I don't think it's the cost of the car charging station, it's the cost of how many more units can I put in, instead of putting in 16 parking spaces, I can put,
So instead of putting in 24, you can put 16 and maybe get another unit.
yeah, right.
Okay, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm just gonna ask one more question,
No,
then
just ask away,
then I'm
ask
gonna try to
away.
not dig us too far. Oh, no, it was a comment, not a question. You had asked, should we make the, should we reduce the maximum for the entire city or only inside that buffer? And I understand, for simplicity's sake, one requirement makes sense, but my concern would be if you're more than half a mile away, it's more likely, theoretically, that somebody's going to need a car. So I guess I have a problem with reducing that maximum outside that, because with our wonderful mass transit in Oregon City, everybody's going to be jumping right on it, right?
Exactly.
But they're less likely to if they're more than half a mile away. So-
They're less likely if they're 2 blocks away.
Right, depending on whether they're on a level street or going up
The hill.
Malala. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
Well, let me
But I
start.
do agree with Commissioner Marl. The state is just defeating their own ideas.
So, an initial question. So, thinking about the members of the ad hoc committee, were any of these members residents within the transit corridor areas?
I don't know where they live.
And the reason I ask is because it's significant as far as I'm concerned. They would have direct understanding of,
The transit corridor is really pretty wide, and
it is.
Carla Laws and Dee Dee Dahlstrom, I think, live within the transit corridor.
Yeah, up in the Malala area, yes.
Yeah, and they're on the ad hoc committee.
Yeah. And nobody else?
I can't remember who else showed up.
Anybody from McLoughlin?
I don't think anybody from McLoughlin was on the ad hoc committee.
Okay. Okay, so then my second question with regard to that is that,
Although we did hear from Tim, because they took this to CIC.
Yeah, and then-
so I got
yeah.
some good
So,
feedback
yeah,
from
he's-
Tim as
yeah,
the
he was-
McLaughlin representative.
yeah. So Mike already alluded to this. The problem I'm having with this is the fact that it needs to be tailored for our community. That transit corridor is too wide. I know it's in the OAR. It's too wide. It doesn't work for Oregon City. It's like I want to say to them, have you been to Oregon City? Topographically, that half mile makes absolutely no sense for our community. It makes no sense for our community in a lot of places, particularly in that corridor between downtown and top of the hill where Eastham School is. There are already a couple of developments that do not have any parking. I think that our community is not desirous of our neighborhoods turning into Hawthorne Boulevard, where the business owners and the residents are competing for parking. People don't have parking in the neighborhood that I live in. Very few people have off-street parking. I happen to be one of them that does, but that's pretty rare. There is really no place to park other than trying to be in front of your own house when you're unloading groceries, children, elderly people, whatever you got to do. And so the half-mile corridor, I would support it if there was a condition in it that says when the transit is up to a level to make it convenient for our residents, we could do that. It is not convenient for our residents. Most people do not take transit in Oregon City because it doesn't work. And we have been only telling TriMet that for the last 25, 30 years. And, you know, there's this chicken and egg. Well, we'll increase service when ridership increase. Well, you can't increase ridership if you don't, if you don't make it convenient for people to take it. And we do have a little Clackamas County shuttle, but it's not full all the time. There's 1 or 2 people on it, and I'm glad it's still there. I don't know how much longer it will be able to last, and I don't know if everybody really knows about it. So for us to say that within a transit corridor, you don't have to have any parking does not work for Oregon City. And what I've been trying to do with this thing is to tailor this so it will work in our town and not have a requirement that is the one size fits all. Just because we're over 25,000 in population doesn't mean that those standards apply and make sense here, because topographically, it makes no sense. I do have a few neighbors that I know do take transit, but their schedules are so flexible that they don't have to rely on it to be at a certain place at a certain time. And what bothers me about the whole thing is that if we really wanted to have climate-friendly stuff, why are we not having a requirement that says no more asphalt parking lots? Parking lots give off so much heat, and having a few stick trees in our parking lots at this stage in our lives is not going to help. We should have a requirement that says we need to use pervious surfaces, no asphalt. That would help climate change. And then as far as the free market, that's how we're in this ridiculous situation, because the free market is only going to go by what makes sense to them and makes money to them. I just talked to somebody today who I wanted to know how come they were moving out of Oregon City. And they said, we wanted to buy a condominium. And there are no condominiums in Oregon City. We want to get rid of our gigantic house. And so we have to move outside of Oregon City in order to do that. I said, and then they told me that their developer told them that we don't allow them. And I just said, you have got to be kidding me. So I know who the developer is. They told me, and I said, well, you can tell them for me that that's not true. Again, that's the free market. So we've lost, a couple of really great volunteers for the city, great neighbors, great friends, because the choices of housing are not available, and we can't force people to build things. What we need is not what the market is, or what the market is being told it needs. So I have a concern about us trying to adopt things that don't work for Oregon City, that are going to cause more problems for our staff to have to regulate and monitor this. And that's why I said, where's the option number 4? We have a few more parcels in the historic core, not downtown, the historic corridor that could be developed. We have, and you and I went there, we have a development at the corner of Harrison and 7th that has these fantastic storm drainage wells right next to the street, next to where somebody would be getting out of their car, and then they're going to have a 10-foot drop into the storm drainage thing. And I don't have a problem with the storm drainage, but why didn't we have some covers put on those so that you can get out of your car? There's no parking in this development, very little, so you can walk out of your car and go to your unit, which faces Eastham School. Instead, there's a big hole there. I know that it was built at considerable expense, but again, we're not using sense to take a look at this. So if some of the other parcels get developed, we have one on a new one that hasn't opened yet because it's taken them forever, and I believe it's at Madison. There is no parking. There's 8 or 9 units. That street is already filled up with local residents who are parking on the street. I don't know where these people are going to move. Because they're not going to not have a car. Oregon City is just not as transit friendly because of our topography. We have not so great transit service. And if our transit service was where it should be, I can see how these rules help us and how these regulations help us, but they don't help us in lieu of the fact that I don't think that TriMet is ever really going to listen to us and get transit. So I want us to figure out a way, and this is just me personally, these guys can say whatever they need to say, how we make this right size for us. I know the OAR says a certain thing, and it's not that I don't care. I don't see how this contributes to the livability of our community. Putting in a conduit and then having no way to get an EV charger and relying on the free market to say, oh, I can get chargers here, will anybody use them? The cars have not come down to price points where people can actually afford them at this point in time. I just want to see some other options that help continue the livability that we have here instead of taking it away. And to have no parking requirements whatsoever in an area that is severely constrained with parking, lack of parking, makes no sense to me. And I can't do that to the residents of this city. Now, in the Hilltop, we have some more options because there's still some lots up there where there could be parking. You know, again, is the transit up there? I don't know. I don't think so. And as much as I, want to work on this, again, it's got a right size for Oregon City. It's not one size fits all, and that's what we're getting, is one size fits all. And I'm appreciative of all the work you've done. I'm appreciative of all the comments that you've gotten from the community. I'm appreciative of the interaction of the other communities have looked at this, but this is just not working. And we constantly get, as electeds, what are you doing to continue the livability? How can you help us make this community continue to be livable? I see this detracts a lot from that.
I'd like to take it back to the EVs one more time.
Talking about it.
And based off of all these comments, I want to make it clear that I'm not anti-EV. If I could afford one, I would have one because my daily round trip commute is just under 2 hours. So I would love to have an EV. My problem, or one of my additional problems, is that, so we heard that there was a planning commission comment that they wanted to look at further incentives for EV parking.
Can I clarify
Yes.
that comment a little bit? So the idea was how it kind of evolved from how do we require new development where we can't require minimums, can we require new development to at least set aside land that could be used one day for either parking or electric vehicle charging? And we can't require that. We can't ask a development to set aside a tract of land without specifically saying why. And so the idea evolved into, well, rather than a stick, how is there a way to incentivize a developer to set aside an area that could one day be used for EV charging?
Okay. Rather than using that land for housing. But just getting to the point of incentives, at least when the choice is presented, I can't support further incentives until the state figures out a scheme to make sure that EVs pay their fair share for our roads.
Exactly.
Once that happens, then I'm totally fine with that. Looking at trying to incentivize more adoption, but yeah, that's just where I am.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to look into the opportunity to apply for grants. We don't have any electric vehicle charging on any of our new facilities, and it's something I brought up earlier. I said, why don't we have any? We could have easily put something out here in this parking lot. We didn't. We have Public Works. Could have easily put something in Public Works. Not saying City Hall because that was past the point of no return. So if we want to encourage these sorts of things, I think we have to step up and do our part. And I know that somewhere out there are grants or programs where we can partner with our utility buddies to put one or two of these in some of our facilities. So it's setting an example. Hey, we've got them. The city of Milwaukee has a whole pod of them downtown in one of their parking lots. I said to them, how did you do that? And how did you work with the utility to get these in there? We've got one or two spaces up at Danielson's Hilltop, that he worked with somebody to get those in there. I don't know, are there any at the college? I don't know if there's any up at Clackamas Community College.
Point taken, I understand that. But I have a couple of responses to some of the comments you were making. One is about the asphalt used for parking lots. That's in our code, development code right now, and that is a change that we can make if that was the will of the commission. We could add some language about pervious surface, but that's completely within our control if we want to change how parking lots and parking stalls are surfaced. And we probably do allow for some pervious pavement in there already. And then the other point that I know you're not going to like, but the transit buffer is already in effect. The state made it go into effect, I think, in 2023, March of 2023. And so our proposal was merely to have our code reflecting what we already have to implement. But right now, if somebody comes in to build within the transit buffer, based on the state code, we can't require parking in that area. So that part's already taken effect.
Sure, it's taken effect. What are they going to do to us?
I have asked that question myself, only to myself. I haven't asked the
Well,
state.
I'm very happy to stick my neck out on the chopping block and ask the question. I would just really like to talk to DLCD staff and say, I understand the goal, I understand the purpose, it doesn't work here. How do we achieve the same result but make it work here? I mean, as you pointed out, a half a mile, I looked at, when you had that map up there.
It's a lot of the city.
It's what? Yeah, which makes no sense for us. The OAR, sorry, it's the concern I've had about this thing from the beginning. As I said, it's a one-size-fits-all. And like I said, you've done a good job in trying to navigate what you feel comfortable with navigating. And
so I guess my question is, we were supposed to have adopted something
I know we've got
quite a
extensions.
while ago. Yeah, I've asked for multiple extensions. Right now, our deadline is the end of June of this year. So the track that we were on was to bring this to a public hearing in front of Planning Commission next month, April 14th, something like that. And then we would be back here, kind of that normal legislative process in May for first and second reading. Am I continuing on that path? Or are you asking us to not continue on that path, or do we just keep moving forward with?
Are they gonna run down here and burn us down if we don't? I mean, I know what you're gonna say. I am personally willing to push the envelope to get something that works here. I don't feel comfortable with 50% of this at all. I don't think it works for Oregon City. I think it's going to cause so many unintended consequences that is not going to make Oregon City a place that people want to live. And right now, there are some neighborhoods that are hotter than others. There has to be, as the eternal optimist, there has to be another way to make this palatable for our community. And I don't know what that is, but I would hope that somebody at the state level would be willing to talk to us about it. And I know the Planning Commission probably feels that they're being forced to do something that they don't feel comfortable with. I don't want to be put in a position of having to do something that I don't feel is in the best interest of this community, regardless of what that OAR says. It's a hard call. You know, we originally joined the lawsuit to not get rid of it, but to basically delay it so that we could, you know, we could have some time to really explore this the way it needs to be explored. And I appreciate the fact that you've applied for deadlines, you know, and I'm probably going to get, you know, I'm going to get a lot of flack from, you know, my colleagues who are working very hard on these things. But, you know, I'm not thinking about the state of Oregon. I'm thinking about Oregon City. And that's who I have an obligation to do the best we can for, you know, and it's not even holding my nose and jumping in and saying, okay, we'll make it work. It needs some more work. So I don't know who it is. I mean, I'm not asking anybody to, you know, I'm not asking you to break the law. That's not, you know, that's why we get paid the big bucks. So I just don't know how comfortable you all feel with this. And I can just see the staff going,
I know you said there's options 1, 2, and 3. And I hear you proposing like, well, I'm gonna make an option 4, right? My concern is again, just coming back to this map, like it's the whole city. And it just, these requirements are just, I don't see how they're gonna benefit our residents at all.
I don't either.
I don't know. It just all seems absurd, and I don't know where I'm going with that. But
Yeah, I mean, you know, I have, we had a member of our TAC who is, was a big bicycle advocate, and as a matter of fact, for his new job, he had to get a driver's license, and he was all freaked out about that. But he's in a city that is promoting bicycles, and I get it. He's in a flat city. We are not in a flat city. And I do see the weekend warriors, you know, pumping up 7th Street, and I give them lots of kudos. And as I mentioned before, when I lived in the flat part of Oregon City, I did ride my bike to the old city hall. But it was an easy, except that last hill there on Barkley Hills Drive, that was a killer. I would walk it up and then ride down on the way home. And so I could do that. Where I live now, there's no way I would ride my bike if we were still up at 320 Warner Millie Road. It's just, you know, it's not workable.
we just need to get one of those ski lift things.
Yeah,
that
and
tow
people say, well,
up
get an
there.
electric bike, you know, well, they didn't have electric bikes back then. So I think we have people that are gonna come and visit Oregon City who are gonna bike across the bridge or bike down the bike lane, and they're gonna come, you know, wanna do some business downtown and, you know, do stuff like that. And I can see us adding, you know, I'm not a big fan of bike corrals because they end up just looking like crap. So my only example is Portland. And again, like I said, I don't want our city to turn into Hawthorne, Division. It's a nightmare in those neighborhoods because there's no required parking. I don't understand, I don't get it. So I'm willing to talk to somebody at the state level, somebody above all of our pay grades, to basically say, how can you help us make this work? Without it being a one-size-fits-all, because that's basically what it is.
So I think it's pretty clear that we want to do the least restrictive path that we can. I mean, I think we all agree with that. But since there isn't option 4, it seems to me that unless we are willing to sue over it, and on what grounds, I don't know, I'm not, but if not, and it's clear, it's in the OAR, a developer, we are instantly going to be in front of LCDC and we're going to lose because we don't have the right to say that they have to build parking within half a mile because it very clearly says. So we got a losing hand unless we can change the rules. And the only way that I know of that we could change the rule is to sue over it.
I'm not there yet.
Lobby your representatives.
Yeah, but that still puts staff in the spot of what do they do with a June deadline?
No, yeah, I mean,
Because that isn't going to happen.
They point the finger at elsewhere. Not their fault if we're being, recalcitrant.
So I agree with Commissioner Mitchell. For the exact same reasons that you said. I mean, we already have tried the fourth option, and we did join a lawsuit, as you just mentioned, and we lost, which is why we're in this position right now. So I would not want us to change the schedule that you've just presented to us, taking it through the legislative process. For one, because I want to be done with this and not have any more meetings about this.
Hear, hear.
But two is because we do not have any way to be successful in this with a fourth option anymore. We tried that.
Well, I didn't think of the lawsuit as, the reason we went into the lawsuit was we wanted the delay. We didn't say we were against this. That's what the commission said. You weren't on it at the time.
I was on the commission at
Yeah,
the
we
time,
said
actually.
we wanted to delay because we were getting pounded with all the housing stuff. And if this was a way to get there, that's what we were doing. Because I basically, got called on the carpet by some colleagues. I said, look, we're not against this. We just can't do it now. We don't have the capacity.
Well, some of the people who were on the lawsuit wanted it just
Yes,
for a
I
delay,
understand that.
But some of the
Yes,
people, some of the
Springfield-
jurisdictions on the lawsuit did not want it to happen, period.
Yeah, I know that, and I talked to some of those folks at OMA and understood their reasoning. And, I talked to the people at Springfield ad nauseum, and I understand where they were coming from. So, yeah. Like I said, I'm an eternal optimist, so. Anyway, I think we are probably done having beaten this dead horse.
well, no. What would you like us to do? I think Aquila was looking for some direction on, are we pausing until the commission tells us otherwise? Are we beginning the process? Are we doing something else?
Gentlemen? He's rolling his eyes. That speaks volumes. I don't take it that you are overwhelmingly overjoyed with this stuff.
No,
So,
no, I feel the same way. I have no answers for you.
well, I think I will respectfully ask Aquila to put me in touch with somebody. And I will do some talking. I'm not going to be doing it to try to persuade anybody. I just want an alternate point of view to be brought forward.
I think Commissioner Mitchell
so-
brings up a good point, that it's one thing not to move forward with it. It's another thing that if someone comes in and develops, they're going to point to the OAR,
Sure they are.
whether we codify it or not. And I'm just not sure what happens at that point. When there are OAR or ORSs that are applicable that aren't addressed in a jurisdiction's land use code, I would assume the ORS is applicable to the application.
Typically, CFEC was a little bit of a oddball. It didn't quite fit with most other DLCD rulemaking, so I'm not 100% sure. But typically, if there are updates to statutes or rules, those apply directly until the city amends its comprehensive plan. So it's likely we'd have to apply these regardless whether they get in there or not. The thing that it's also the options, how those options play out. It's a little more complicated than that, but to the extent we don't adopt it, we'll have trouble if something comes before the city that tries to rely on it. The other thing that may happen is LCDC may take what's known as an enforcement action, which would result in pulling DLCD funds, and there could be other consequences as well. So, exactly what LCDC is going to do, don't know. How it plays out, I think we end up following them anyway. So I don't know if that helps your decision or
Well, what I would worry about is that because we don't pick one,
They'll impose a
well,
Yeah.
model code on us.
or the
Zero
developer,
decisions on our part.
or the developer says, oh, I want to do this, and it would be the last thing we would have picked out of the options, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
It's a what if.
that's, well, okay, it's a what if, but if we have nothing, right? I mean, I get that it's bad and worse, right? But then if you have nothing, who's going to referee if somebody actually comes in and says, I want to do this one? And it's like, oh, no, we were never going to consider that. Well, you didn't adopt anything, and it's in the ORS and OAR, and you prove I can't do it, city.
I think, to your point, at what point do we just kind of say, is there anything we can actually do about this? And do we want to keep fighting this if it's a losing battle?
I'm not trying to fight it.
Yeah, but like at the same time, like we're doing this under duress, right? So I don't know if we can,
Well,
ask.
we were asked by staff for some sort of consensus, so, if you want staff to move forward, that's, they do that. If you want to think about it some more, I know you're sick of talking about it. I mean, I've looked this over, and looked this over, and read the thing, and,
I don't want staff to move forward, but I think we should.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that doesn't mean that you can't continue to pursue it the way you were talking about.
well, I'm going to, because I think I owe it to our constituents.
But I do think we have to have, I think staff has to continue on the schedule that you recommended.
I agree.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
And in the
Well, I
meantime,
only
the
heard
mayor
two,
will
so.
achieve a full repeal in that
No,
time.
no, I'm not gonna try to get a full repeal. It's not my goal.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, more than 5. Let's come back at 10 till. last discussion, I'm going to be burned in effigy in Tony's office. It's like, what are you saying? What's wrong with you? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. And we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is item C. Being that item B was my favorite one, this is only my second favorite one, so I'm sorry, Alex. All right, so we're going to have a general discussion on the McLoughlin Promenade follow-up. And so you can kind of give the overview of the commission authorizing us to move towards making this a charter park, which is the whole premise of the whole thing.
Absolutely. Okay, so back in January, we came and presented to you a progress report on executing encroachment license agreements with the owners along the promenade that are encroaching onto the property. At that time, you had instructed us to use encroachment license agreements only, exclusively, and we did run into some concerns as to various aspects of that agreement, whether it was indemnity language or other items. Some folks haven't responded at all, and then a few have signed. So at this point, what we've done is list some additional options, since it did seem that there was some openness to considering things beyond the encroachment license agreements. So in the staff report, you'll see outlined that we have vacation of property as an option. We have a simple acknowledgement of encroachments through a letter to each property owner, and you'll see that it was a draft sample of what that could look like. And, or you could just simply require removal of all encroachments, or you can do some combination of the above options, choosing a different option for each property. There is a list of all of the properties in your packets with a brief description and just a quick status update as to whether or not they have signed, declined to sign, maybe have made a request of you, in which case those are also included in the packet, or have not responded. So you'll see, and Bill can expand on this if you'd like, easements are not being recommended. And then the final, note is just that since there are 4 property owners that have signed the existing encroachment license agreement, should you choose to move away from that agreement or modify it, what would you like to do, with those owners if you're going to make those changes? So we're really just looking for guidance from you all tonight on how you'd like to move forward. And then did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I do just want to touch on a couple things, not necessarily for you, but also for anybody who might be listening, talking about easements and lot line adjustments and other types of things. And the issue with those is the way in which the city acquired the property. If we buy a lot and we get into a dispute with our neighbor and we solve it through a lot line adjustment or an easement, we can go ahead and do that. The city didn't buy the promenade. It was dedicated to the city. And when it's dedicated to the city, that means the city is acting as a trustee for that property and can only use it for the purposes for which it was dedicated. So for example,
Well, you didn't use the term public purpose because that's what it says on the plat.
but it's also designated as a promenade I forget the language, but it is a promenade. That's a whole separate question, whether promenade is and whether it's a street, whether it's a park, whether it's sort of a combination, but, whatever it was dedicated for, that's all we can use it for. And for example, a community, I think it was Rockaway Beach, tried to build a sewer pump station in a roadway, and the Court of Appeals said, no, you can't do that. It's got to be for road purposes. Right. Douglas County tried to build a grange, and they said, no, you can't build a grange. It's for, even though you control it, you're never going to open up a road there, it's got to remain available for a road. And so that's where we run into things like doing a lot line adjustment. That doesn't get rid of the dedication. The only way to get rid of the dedication is through a vacation process. If it remains dedicated and we lot line adjustment or provide an easement, that is, really kind of a cloud that continues over that property. That's also why, if you remember our right-of-way licenses where people have a retaining wall or a fence in the right-of-way, when we're granted, that license that they have to be in the right-of-way is revocable, that we can revoke it at any time is what it says. And that's why, is because we've got to make sure that it's available to the purpose for which it was dedicated.
Which is the roadway.
Which is a roadway. And in this case, it is a promenade. And there's some things that are probably consistent with a promenade. Somebody maintaining a rose garden, we don't know what a promenade actually is, but that could be consistent. Things like structures, that's likely not consistent. And so if in fact we don't want to have them removed, we can either ignore it for now and deal with it later, or some other commission may have to deal with it. Or if we think it's fine that that structure stays there, we just have it for whatever reason it got built there, then the proper thing to do to avoid complications in the future is vacate that property. So I'm happy to answer questions about it, but that's why when you see things like an easement or a lot line adjustment, I'm saying that's just not really the best way to deal with it.
Are there any questions about the options? I mean, I think one was just to write and say, we acknowledge that you're encroaching on public land. I mean, it's not quite ignoring it, but it is acknowledging it and putting an owner on notice. I'm not sure if it does more than that.
I'm not certain it does any more than that either. And, typically another thing, you and I own property, you put your fence on there, you say, I own it, we get a survey 15 years later, it turns out the fence is in the wrong place. There's something called adverse possession, where you get to, because you owned it open and notoriously under a claim of right, you essentially acquire that property. It's a little more complicated than this, but basically you can't adverse possess against a governmental entity. So,
I knew that.
If we were to send a letter acknowledging it, 20 years from now, that future commission decides, you know what, we really want to do something over in this area. There's a fairly, there's likely a good chance they can do it. There's another doctrine called latches, which is a equitable doctrine that says you can't sleep on your rights. And there's been some discussion in the case law about whether latches applies against governments, and it's not really answered. So, it may be that 20 years from now the city can't do it, but in any event, that wouldn't be our problem. The question now is how much do we want to definitively set the relationship now, and how much we're willing to continue to, operate the way we've operated for, some cases decades, as far as certain properties in that area. And, that's up to the commission.
So you're saying that under number 1, if it's vacated, then it no longer is part of the promenade? I mean, I know what a vacation is. I've done several of them, but never on a piece of public property. It's always been private property. There's a prescriptive way you do it. You look at the plat, you figure out where it came from, and then, it went back to those adjoining owners. In some cases, it went to one side or the other because of the way the property was originally dedicated.
Right.
So if a vacation occurs, what happens to the status of the fact that it was dedicated for public purposes as a promenade or,
Yeah, and sort of, the purposes don't matter too much. If you look at the statutes on vacation, the road, like a road is a classic vacation. We vacate roads, not infrequently. And the default is it goes back half and half, depending on which, half to each side of the road. But that can be overridden if, in fact, it's clear that, road was all along one property. And when you go back and look and say, okay, that came from this property, so all the lots on that side get all of the road. In this case, the vacation was made, when the town was made. And just in looking at the plat, I believe that, because the promenade essentially functions linearly and was made a promenade because of, the sheer cliff on one side and the views, none of these vacations are going to be more than about 6 feet, I think, and most of them would be relatively smaller than that. I believe it would attach to the properties that are immediately adjacent to it. So, unless there's some situation where somebody had gone out onto the promenade and gone over sort of in front of their neighbor's house, that might be a problem. But for every one that I've seen there, I believe the property would attach to the person, to the house that's actually using it.
I think, in this case, if you take a look at the original plat of Oregon City, the promenade shows up on there, and the houses, or the lots are adjacent to it. There weren't, so I think that the intent was to create this for the public. It was not, and so where things got lost in translation is nobody looked at where the lot lines are when they were building some of these things. And in some cases, there was clear indication that that was not part of the property, and something got built there anyway. But I don't really want to kick this can down the road. I think we need to deal with it, and each one of these is an individual case, and I think we should deal with them on an individual basis. There's not one thing on here where one size fits all. I think, as you correctly stated, we did not budget for doing a bunch of vacations. So there's financial implications there for the city. Again, it says who's responsible for recording fees, lot line adjustments, survey work, preparation of legal documents, city application fees, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a question we would have to answer. I don't have good clarity, and I've read item number 3 like 3 times. And I'm not sure what that means. So if we sent a letter, does that get recorded on those particular documents? It's just up to somebody. They have a letter, could get lost in translation, and then we'd be in the same fix we are in right now.
Yeah. I guess fix might be, we'd be in the same situation. Some people might not look at it as a fix. It's, the city's operated without those, with these encroachments occurring for, depending on the encroachment, a few years, a few decades, whatever it may be.
Sure.
So.
Can I ask a question about number 3? Is there a reason that we would not require a signature from the property owner?
Given Alex's experience, it may well be that we'd be unable to obtain a signature, and then what do we do?
I think it was, the idea behind it was to acknowledge as the property owner.
Exactly.
That this is occurring. We're not asking you to do anything at this point. We are letting you know. And that'd be the extent of it.
Well,
It's not asking the property owner for or to do anything.
Well, I think they should sign it.
But even if there was an acknowledgement that the letter was received, I'm just trying to avoid a situation where somebody, I expanded my landscaping because I didn't know that
Exactly.
this whole thing was going on.
Well, we're always going to get that, but yeah.
Yeah.
We do.
You're going to sell the property 2 years from now, and the new owner 3 years later is going to say, I know nothing about this.
Exactly.
And, that's,
That's why I was saying this needs to be somehow run with the land.
it's hard to get something to run with the land without an agreement on the other side. And if, that was part of the encroachment license. It's like, you're encroaching, we know it, let's just agree where we are. And that was significant pushback.
Would vacations require survey?
Yes. And we've got, most of the survey done from, what we've done, exactly how that works.
I guess it'd be how complicated it is, right? Because we're gonna have to come up with a new legal of the land to be vacated. So we have the survey, right, that shows the property line. Let's say the lot's 50 foot wide and we're gonna add 2 feet, right? So we're gonna have to draw up a legal description that says from point 2 feet to the west, northwest, by 50 feet to the, someone's gonna have to write that up. So that section inside that new legal boundary can be vacated.
Okay, so there'd be the expense of writing that up and recording it.
Yeah.
But like, for instance, yes, the one where the house is 7 inches in, we've obviously already done a survey to have it nailed down that it's 7 inches. So there wouldn't be a survey required, right? But there would have to be a new legal description and recording of that, which is going to cost money, right?
Surveyor's going to have to do some sort of work, how extensive it is, whether it's, we can just type this up in a computer and be done in 5 minutes. It doesn't seem like they should have to get out there and shoot, the land, but the surveyor's going to have to take some action to create.
I'm just not sure.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes it's going to be, there are points, right? That they take their survey markers off of, right? So if the nearest point is at an intersection, do they have to survey, it's 148 feet to the property, or is it as simple as, tax lot 2 of plat X, we're adding 7 inches. I'm not sure how it's gonna have to be written up in order for the city or the county recorder to accept it.
In the instance of the property owner, I believe you were mentioning, they did offer actually to pay for all of those costs.
Who did?
The Yates, the home with the foundation slightly over, in their letter, they did offer to pay for those
Okay.
costs. I'm just pointing that out.
Okay.
And that one is actually the one, that's kind of the exception to the rule of the encroachments that we have here, right? That's an actual foundation, right? Versus some of these
A
other things
stairwell or
like
something.
parking
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
landscaped areas or drive aisles, those aren't really structures in and of themselves.
And if I'm not mistaken, at least one of them is an attorney who realizes the implications of it and says, yes, I want to get this done and get my structure essentially, on my property.
Yeah, so we're talking about the Yateses?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, they're both attorneys.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I would suggest, I know we have folks from the VFW here, but are there any in here that we can say it's already taken care of, like this Yates one? So we can, if they're willing to pay for the vacation, we can say, generally not take a vote, but say, move forward with that request. Just take that off the table. So we, there's a few of them here, I think, that are a little bit of low-hanging fruit that we can deal with specifically, or we can just go page by page and property by property. So what would you
So the
prefer?
Yates are the only property owners that have asked for a vacation and then have actually offered to pay.
Pay for it, yeah.
Yeah. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't other properties in here that seem,
Right.
maybe fairly straightforward. There are different requests being made.
well, let's-
There are other folks who are asking for vacations. They have not offered to pay for anything.
Okay. Okay, well, let's just start with number one and just go.
Sorry,
yes.
can I ask real quick, and
Sure.
this may be a tough question to answer, I understand there would be a cost associated with vacating, what kind of cost are we actually talking about?
All those things he listed.
Okay.
All the recording fees, lot line adjustments, survey work, preparation of legal documents, city application fees. I recorded something about a year ago and it was one page, it was $93.
Okay.
I don't know if the fees have gone up since then, but I know that that's what I did personally for my property.
Yeah, I think the cost is going to be in the complexity or how simple it is to come up with the legal.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Is it pretty cut and dry, straightforward, a simple description, or, is there actual survey work required? A couple $1,000?
Could be more
Okay. Per property?
per property.
Perfect, thank you.
Unless we just did one long line and just moved it all.
We just make it easy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just get at it? Okay, well, number one is the Three Rivers, and they're here. So you guys want to come over here? And again, we're getting down to who's paying for this. You have a solution, but so has everybody read this one? Any thoughts from the commission before we ask them?
I think the one thing I would just point out is that, this is probably one of the more, involves the most movements.
Right.
We used to be able to move a bunch of lines at once and call it a lot line adjustment. That got nixed, so every line we moved was a lot line adjustment. So if you were moving a line, out, over, that was 3, right? When we used to do it as 1. This property itself was created via minor partition of the lot outside, so you have the original tax lot, and then a partition was done to create the lot of which the VFW is located on. So this, because of the number of lot line adjustments, this may be, just from a land use standpoint, kind of a replat of the partition. So it might not be as simple as just some lot line adjustments. We're gonna have to look at it if that's where we end up. I think it's just a matter of process. I think we can get there. It's just like some of these we've talked about vacating and just recording. This may be a little bit harder because this was a partition that created this lot inside of the parent parcel. That is the Promenade. I don't even know if this was vacated when it was partitioned.
My understanding was vacated.
Okay,
It's been a
all right.
while since I've looked at it, and I'd have to ask Jacob,
Right,
who
and
did
so
the
where
research.
it encroaches into the green, we'd be vacating.
Yeah, we'd
that
have
as
to
well.
vacate that green,
Yeah.
yeah,
So there's a couple things going on with this one.
right, there's a land use piece as well as a vacation piece.
Yep.
So hang on. So commissioners, just consensus, is this an option you're willing to consider?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's willing to consider this option.
So I'm the author. And as somebody mentioned before, you just want to own your property. Our stairs are the part that's encroaching. And we are one of the people that did sign the letter initially. But then the concern started to grow of, well, if our stairs, you revoke it, we don't have stairs going in, so it's kind of an important thing. So we want to get control of our property, and the city wants to get control of their property, which is the parking lot. If you look at the aerial photo, you'll see that our property basically blocks access to the parking lot. That is not something that we're ever going to enforce by any means. I probably just gave away a jack or something in the card deck. But anyway, so we looked at this as an opportunity to solve multiple problems in one easy, but not say simple thing. So we looked at moving our property line back 24 feet to give you the parking lot, 15 or 20 feet, I don't remember which one it is now, off of the side. And then the bump out, the 80-foot bump out that we've got is because we have a flagpole and a flag burning station. And a historic wall. And so that's why the 18 feet out, oh yeah, I got the number. The 18 feet out and then 80 feet wide and back in is to own that territory. And just as a kind of a quick, numbers game, we're looking at giving up roughly 5,000 square feet and only asking back a little over 600 square feet. So the city gains about, I think I did the math in my write-up, roughly 4,200 square feet more to the park. And so, we looked at it as, thank you. Have this extra park space and don't charge us, please. We're willing to talk about funds if that's where we have to go, but we really, we're a nonprofit. We don't. And also that would almost create, for you to go forward, a parcel of a bundle of land that so you lose 12 square feet to the eighths. Well, that's, you're still ahead. You lose 85 square feet to this person, you're still ahead. So that when you go to if the public starts to complain, you can say, look, the park's getting bigger.
Okay, we'll keep it short.
Yep. So anyway, the reason for those dimensions are the 24-foot to give you the parking lot, the 80 by 18 to give us control of our property, and the 15 feet on the side is to just create a land bank to add to the park. It's not something that we maintain, and it's, so that's the reason for it. And also to get some goodwill so we maybe don't have to write a check.
And it moves that staircase too.
Yeah, oh yeah. And that's the other thing that the 24 feet portion does is there's a staircase that's partially in our property, partially in your property, and now the staircase becomes wholly controlled by the city. So it's a win for the city. They own everything. We own everything. But it does look weird.
Okay, so what's our consensus so we can ask staff to move forward?
I think the proposal is more than reasonable.
The question is, who's
I'm sorry,
paying?
I didn't hear that. Would you mind repeating?
I just said, I think the proposal is more than reasonable, but to your point, it did.
Can you throw some money at it to help us do this?
Well, I think if this is something that we're willing to go forward with, then we need to figure out what the cost is, and then we can talk about cost sharing. Like we'll pick up X or we'll split it or whatever.
Does that sound reasonable? Okay.
Yep. And I would just ask if the commission, I think I know the answer to this, but just want it to be on the, that we're talking about it, there still is a portion of the drive aisle that would be on the new tax lot that's created. And that we would negotiate easements, access easements, where the city can cross the property and maintain access in those drive aisles.
Yeah, I think I said in the thing that, you would have complete and unfettered access as long as you maintain the asphalt or something like that. That's definitely our intent. So, yeah,
Okay.
I mean, like you do now.
All right.
And there's 3 handicap parking spots that the city gets to count because they're in front of our property, or in front of our building.
So can we get some costs so we know exactly, it won't be absolute, but we can get a general idea of what it might cost so we can talk about that.
One final piece.
Sure.
Mr. Mabee indicated that you'd get $4,300 square feet back to the park. That was designated.
Right.
I mean, that was originally part of the promenade. It was vacated in, I believe, the 50s.
No, 47.
Okay, so that is no longer part of the promenade. One, the city could dedicate it again, regardless of whether they dedicate it again. When the designation happens, would the commission want to designate the new area to be part of the park, even though it's not dedicated? And that might be...
I would need to see where that area is and how adjacent it is.
Yeah, so if you look
It's
at
the
this
east.
map, it's essentially this portion, the green area
Right.
is designated McLoughlin Park.
Right.
And then this part and this part.
Areas on the north of the blue line that are kind
Right,
of
okay.
tan.
Sort of the L around the backside and north side.
Is
of
that
the
right up against the
VFW.
bluff?
Yes.
Well, yeah, the inside, yeah, between this property and,
And South
High-
Bluff.
High,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's
This area
some
is
rock
what-
outcroppings and what that.
There we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, that area on the backside of the VFW, right.
Yep, right there, yep.
And then the top side, then.
On the north side.
North, for lack of
Yeah.
a better term.
But it's,
Yeah.
you know,
You guys could just orient it
the
better.
elevation
I know
between
it
that
is.
and where the street is,
Yeah, there's,
Yeah,
there's,
there's-
it's-
yeah.
there's quite a bit of
yeah.
a rise in that area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't put topo on there because then there wouldn't be any room for anything else.
I guess I don't know at this point.
Yeah, that isn't a decision you have to make tonight,
Okay,
but just
all right.
one more thing to,
Okay,
Or it just gets captured in the charter park
Charter,
designation.
yeah, that might be the easiest
Yeah.
thing to do is just capture it
Let
in
it
the
be.
designation.
Yeah. Okay.
okay. Number 2,
Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Number 2, is this shed on a foundation?
Not that I'm aware of, but I haven't gone out and seen it in person. But it is mostly in the right of way.
Well, my suggestion, if it's not on a foundation, they move it out of the right of way. That solves that problem.
So the current status is they've received the information but haven't signed the agreement or applied for the necessary right-of-way permit. So if they don't do it, that would mean code enforcement?
For me, the question is it on a foundation? If it's not on a foundation, move it out of the right of way. Solves the problem. We have no building encroaching into the right of way.
If it is on a foundation,
Is it?
I said if it is.
Oh, if it is. If it is on a foundation, my opinion is that if they want to keep it there, I know it's only 1.8 feet, and that shed has not been there since '06. So that shed was not constructed by the current owner, but it's not something that's been there for 50 years, or 40 years, or 20 years, or 5 years. So,
There's two different things going on, though, right? It's 1.8 feet in the promenade, but it says significant portion is in the right-of-way. Do we know how much is that?
In the
is?
second-
It might not even,
second
there might not be room to slide that shed over. I mean, if it's,
My memory is it's like half of it is in the right-of-way.
Half of it's in the right-of-way.
But, that's.
yeah, when we went and did our little tour and we looked at it,
I guess I'd also wonder if there was a building permit issued.
is what?
Was there a building permit issued?
Oh, I doubt it.
Evan, could you zero in on the shed at the top right corner? Not that, the middle picture. Keep going further. You can, okay, see the brown lines? That's the right of way. So
Well, that's the whole shed, isn't it?
yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
75% of it.
yeah.
I mean, that is GIS, so
Yeah,
it's
I know
not
there was,
exact.
I know
but-
there used to be a bunch of stuff in the backyard, but maybe there isn't that much stuff in the backyard anymore.
So it's Second Street's a 60-foot right-of-way, roughly.
Yeah, it's where they're parking right
And
now.
then, just looking at, just GIS aerial mapping, right? 10 to 11 foot, it looks like is the encroachment into Second Street.
Yeah, I'd say either they move it or they apply for a right-of-way permit.
In terms of.
What do we do with the
But that doesn't solve the promenade encroachment.
No, I know that doesn't
Yeah.
solve the promenade problem.
So if in fact it's not on a foundation and they can move it, they can solve both the right-of-way and the promenade.
Right.
If it is on a foundation, I think what I heard the mayor saying, I don't know the rest of the commission, the idea is maybe get the right-of-way permit, and then would the commission consider vacating for that 1.8 feet into the promenade?
What do you think?
I personally have a harder time vacating property for a shed, if I'm being honest.
No, I get it. I get it.
Would we accept signature on the license agreement? Or is it a gotta move it? Like, I'm not sure. So let's say it's on a foundation, right? We've got a process to apply for a right-of-way encroachment, right? What do we do with the promenade side?
Promenade part?
Because we don't really have a process.
No, I would not vacate that because it's still going to be in the street. How big is the shed? Is it over 200 square feet, which I think it is?
That means.
I just don't think you're going to find any permits for construction of the shed.
I mean, just off GIS 20 by 14. So what's that, 280?
Yep. And did we get a letter from them at one time? They've not responded in any way?
They provided public.
Testimony?
They did provide public comment
Okay.
in January.
Right, okay, so they've responded in some way.
Otherwise, no, they have not responded.
Well, I would call some public testimony some response. Well, I think there's some options, they can move it, apply for a right-of-way permit, they can, I know it sounds crazy, but they could rebuild a shed that conforms, that's under 200 square feet. It's in the McLoughlin Conservation District. They're using part of the public right-of-way right now as parking. But, cars are movable. What do you want to do? You don't want a shed in the right-of-way, so that's your comment. Rocky?
Just real quick, my comment wasn't necessarily not wanting a shed in the right-of-way if they apply for a permit. Mine was I have a harder time vacating promenade property for a shed.
A shed, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. I think I'm with you on that one. Mike? I'm not sure what the eyebrow raise means, but I'll try to interpret it.
I think I'd like to know if it's on a foundation or not. Because that really definitely changes the cost of moving it. Well, I don't know, maybe it doesn't.
Well, we'll just run right over there. Adam?
So I think it would be best if we gave direction on both scenarios,
Right.
just given how prolonged this has been. If it's not on a foundation, then I would support just asking them to move it. If it is, I'm fine with the right-of-way permit. And I agree with Commissioner Wilson, I don't want to vacate. And I think it's important to note that the fact that we're even considering these requests is above and beyond what we have to do, because we are the property owner.
Right.
This is our property. And so it does not have to be a negotiation. So I think I would reiterate that if that is not something that they're responsive to, then that is when code comes into play.
Yeah, and I said, well, I'd only want to use code as the absolute last resort.
So they could,
Okay, so then I have a couple follow-up questions. So for the promenade portion, are you saying that you want them to sign the encroachment license agreement?
you want it moved.
Or if it's, so say it's on a foundation and they get the right-of-way permit for the promenade portion, do we want the encroachment license agreement? Is that the requirement?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay, 214 Bluff. We have a deck, landscaping, rock borders, slope transition, chairs, and planting. And the fire pit. I think they got code because they were lighting fires in the public property. Thoughts? Okay, well, I'll take it off. No fire pits, period. We should not be having people burning for any reason on public property. As I recall, this is a fairly new house. Is that correct? This is not a house that's been there for eons. So why is their deck encroaching into the promenade? I don't get that. I'm not thrilled about plantings or chairs or rock borders on public property. If the deck, I've got an issue with the deck. It says the deck extends 2.8 feet into the promenade. It's probably a deck that's probably not more than 3.5 feet off the ground, so they wouldn't have had to have a permit, but can't really see the deck from this picture right here. It's kind of like, well, once I blow this up, this gets extremely blurry. Thoughts about the furniture, the fire pit, chairs?
I mean, I agree. I think those are easily to be removed.
Yeah, I'm fine with the deck. If we were to, again, pursue the license route. But for everything else, this sends a fake demarcation to people who are walking along the promenade as to where the boundaries of the park are.
Yeah.
So I think it needs to go.
Yeah, I'm very disappointed in the fact that there's been no response, and I'll just say from a courtesy standpoint, it's rude that there's been no response.
So just to clarify, the deck is okay, you want everything else to come out, and that is including any landscaping?
Well, unless it's landscaping that conforms with what was already, I don't know what the I can't remember now. I mean, I took notes when we went out to see it. I don't know what the landscaping is.
Okay.
I mean, if it's rhododendrons and, I don't know what it is.
So just out of curiosity, are we possibly saying if the landscaping doesn't like conform to the park, there might be a
I
request to
don't know.
remove it?
We've got some other areas where the landscaping is just like, there's there's kind of some arborvitae type plantings there. It's like, those aren't even native, to our particular area. So I don't know what the landscaping is because I don't remember. But I guess we've got a consensus, it goes.
The landscaping goes.
Well,
I don't know what it is exactly.
I don't think I agree with having it removed. The chairs in the fire pit, yes. And we need a the license agreement for the deck.
Right. Either
But-
that or they can cut off 2.8 feet of it. and make
But I
it
don't,
out of the problem.
but I don't have a problem with allowing the landscape to stay the way it is.
Do you remember what it was?
No?
Well, to me, it would depend on what it is. I don't know what it is.
I agree with Commissioner Mitchell. The only caveat is that I do think that the rock borders need to come out. And whether you consider that landscaping, I don't know. But again, that gets into the demarcation.
Well, there's a number of people that did that. They started piling up rocks like it was part of their property, and that's...
I know, and that's what I'm saying. I think, that
Yeah.
is one that I do think
Yeah,
needs to go.
yeah.
But as for the rest of the landscaping, I don't feel particularly strong about that.
Well, okay, I will kind of go along with that until I can go over there and look at it, see what that is. Okay, 210 Bluff. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, so are we holding off on a final decision on this one then until?
No, let's just move forward, and
Okay.
and if the landscaping is something weird, I will get back to you and say,
Okay.
I think it's weird,
Okay.
or it's not appropriate. I don't know I can't remember what it is.
And then we'll bring it back to the entire group.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll
To
just
have a
report back to
discussion.
you. Okay, 210 Bluff, we got landscaping and a rock wall. Again, you made the statement that having those pots and stuff out there is a clear, like this is our property, that needs to go. I don't know what the staked item is. Is there some plantings that are staked?
I believe it's, they look like almost like little pieces of art or wind chimes that are staked into the ground. I believe that's what that's referring to in this photo.
Okay, that can be removed. They can take all their pots and put it on their property. Again, no response. I'm willing to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Sorry, can I just clarify real
Sure.
quick? For property number 3, for the items staying, do you want an encroachment license agreement?
What's staying?
Yeah,
The deck.
the deck.
They
And I
have a
think
deck?
Yeah. For the one we just.
Sorry,
finished.
back one to number
back
3.
one.
I just
Back one.
realized that we
Yeah,
didn't.
I think that's what
we didn't-
everybody-
There's probably like an at-grade sidewalk that comes around the side of the house to the deck, right? So you've
Yeah,
got that
they can sign a
encroachment.
license agreement, or they can take off 2.8 feet of the deck, and it won't be in the property.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay, 210 Bluff.
Yes. So you wanted the pots out, the staked items out, rock walls, are those? Out. Okay, so everything's out.
Rocky? Yep, everybody says consensus, everything out.
Okay, everything is out, so then they don't need an agreement.
No.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
Those two are those last two we talked about are the same owner, by the way. Not that it matters, but
Yep,
might
they are.
explain why there
AK
was no
Ventures
response.
LLC.
Yeah.
So
Right.
are they rentals?
I think so.
Probably.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay. 302. We got a stair, it's the issue, is it the issue of the stairs?
And the deck.
Decks.
Parking.
Decks, stairs, parking, and some landscaping that are all encroaching.
I think this is the first one. We'll see a couple more of these where the roads out there, and then what do we do with the parking? That's, essentially up to the property
So-
line.
I don't have a
I'm
problem
going to
with the
speak
parking.
on this one because
Sure.
I think this one, from the beginning of looking at I don't know how many houses are inside that roadway.
A lot,
3?
3 or 4.
To me, the second we put that roadway in, we detached that section from the park. And that was our doing as a city. We put a driveway in there, we made it a road. I can't imagine us trying to do anything with the property on the house side of that road. That's theirs now. And I think we can't really, we made the choice to put the road in there. The park's on the other side of it. We're not going to take it back. I think we have to vacate it. I don't know how we get around not doing that because we had the say in putting the road there. And
Do you have any wild idea of when that was put in, the roads were in there?
Oh, jeez, I can't remember it not being there, but.
Yeah, I mean, ever since I've been.
Well, I mean, it precedes all of us.
Yeah, I mean, but there was always a road there of some sort,
Yeah.
whether it was gravel or dirt
Yeah, I
or
know
whatever,
when I
but I
did-
don't,
When I
but,
did some site visits, I had somebody come out and say, oh, you're driving on a private road. I said, no, this is part of the park.
right,
Sorry, I have a right to be here.
right. I mean, it is our road, but,
I mean, 99, you can kind of see it.
In 99?
You can see something.
What about in 1899?
Well,
yeah.
the drones weren't that good back then.
Well, I know we went in there and changed because of the flooding or the drainage, and so we fixed the road and we put the road in there, but
Yeah, this looks like rock, maybe.
What's the earliest aerials we have?
99.
Really? I thought we had some that were older than that.
I mean, maybe like larger.
Yeah, I meant like
pictures.
paper copies, not digital.
Not in GIS.
ODOT may have some that cover this area.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that stairwell has been rebuilt in the last 10 years or so. There's a lot of activity going on at that house for a while.
I agree with Commissioner Smith.
Scott?
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I would just, when I was looking at the properties earlier, I was imagining, okay, let's say we said, hey, the property owners had to remove everything. I can't imagine the public going from one side of the promenade across the road and then saying like, oh, this is,
Right.
park space. I just
we've
don't
kind
see
of already
that.
detached it.
Oh, I did it.
Okay, fair.
Years ago, not recently. I did it when I was working for the city. I was doing some work out there and I went right, that person wasn't living there. I just went right over there because I knew it was part of the park.
That's fair. I think that the road in some way does kind of like delineate, like
Yeah.
this is the end of the park and this is the beginning of
Okay.
residential space. So yeah,
So I don't know, in that case, do you go from the center of the road or do you go from the grass?
That was a question I was going to ask,
I mean, I don't mind going from the center of the road.
And I guess
But-
the question becomes, do you want to take that Bluff Street and make it a private street? If you want Bluff Street to remain open to the public, then it would just be the edge of the road or maybe even,
That's
5,
what
10
I'm thinking.
feet.
I don't think we want to
that's
make it a
probably
private
true,
street.
Because it would be used as a walkway for some people and as a public park.
Yeah.
So maybe we do go to the,
So, and typically, like Second Street we just talked about, it's a 6-foot right of way, the paving's 20, 30 feet. I don't think we're going to get that, but I would assume that we'd want to have, a few feet on the homeward side of
Right.
the property. And so
Right.
probably talk to Public Works about what makes sense. I don't know, Parks uses that to access it, but just.
Exactly, yeah.
Make sure that whatever gets vacated, there's enough space on that side that it can still be used appropriately.
That one on Second Street, that's the main access for the promenade cleanup crews.
okay.
So
Yeah.
we need to maintain the street there. Okay, so we're gonna, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, with the recognition that putting a street through any of our property doesn't make it not our property. I agree with the
Right.
concept,
Yeah, right.
but
Yeah.
putting a street through any of our property does not make the other side of it not our property anymore. But in keeping with what I said earlier about the clear demarcation,
Yeah, right.
I
That-
support what you were
So
saying.
right here,
I
you think is,
understand. Yeah, I-
that's
All right.
Here's the promenade, right, so I think we're talking about this green
Yeah.
section, right, flip on.
well, it depends what's going on with the other ones.
So the next couple ones we're gonna be looking at, right, we've got the porch, the parking.
Jeez, well, I guess that next section is a little different.
It gets,
That's a lot.
yeah, it's not the same as this.
So are we,
Yeah, that is different.
It's still platted, though.
You should probably be at a mic.
Sorry.
You should probably be at a mic.
You can turn that, you can move that one. They still work. I would just turn it around and be talking from over there.
Because is that,
Oh, it's not showing up on there. you want to?
So, yeah, I mean, that's all right, I can just carry it.
Yeah, that'll move. That works.
So yeah, I guess the question is, obviously this has probably grown from a path to probably rock to paved, right? We've done probably minimal work out there, right? So it's like, do we leave ourselves a little bit of room, right? If we have to get in there, do any work on it, if we're ever going to improve it, so do we kind of just focus on these 3 lots?
Yeah.
And then, this is still relatively natural.
Yeah, and people do probably go up in there. Well, I mean, I don't know, it goes back to Commissioner Marl's point, but it's a big chunk that's,
And I don't think,
know that I want to.
I don't think we have any issues with 315.
Doesn't show up on.
No.
So we don't have an encroachment issue there right now.
Yeah,
Do you want us to kind
separate
of come
that.
up with something?
I think
That's a
so.
whole lot of property that I'm not willing to give
I
up
know.
once we get past 302.
But there is, if you keep going further
Is
north.
there another section of
Yeah,
that?
it kind of bumps out again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figure you want to see them both before we kind of think about it, so we can, because I mean, it's very similar issue.
Yeah,
What is the status of Promenade Street now? Is it a city street?
It's a something.
It's a paved portion of the promenade. I don't
Yes,
think
it's a paved portion. There you go.
dedicated
It's
of
not
the,
it's a
street.
paved portion of the promenade. That's what it is.
Okay, and are we talking about
I mean,
changing
I
the
guess
status of that?
here's the problem, is that if when it shows up on the map, so typically, right, you'll see High Street, right? This is obviously right-of-way, right,
Yes.
with the property lines, right? So you have a property line that ends there, right, of these.
Right.
Right.
You don't really have a property line around Promenade. So it just seems to be this access way built on the lot. So I
Right.
don't think it's not, but the Promenade is this public use.
Right.
Is it for park? Is it for vehicle? Is it for pedestrian? Is it for bike? What is that promenade?
Yeah,
So this access way got built on it, but it's, as far as I can tell, it's not dedicated right of way.
Okay.
Right.
It's part of the park, as you said.
Yeah, and there are plenty of parks that have streets, or not
Or a
necessarily but streets, or,
roadway.
paved
A paved
portions.
area,
Yeah,
not a roadway,
whether it's a
a paved-
pathway,
yeah.
whether cars drive on it.
Where they
you know.
use for maintenance, whatever.
Right. So it's, it is part of the promenade. It happens to be a paved portion of the promenade.
Okay.
Hard to see with the trees, but we don't want the trees to go.
You want me to put them down?
Sure. Go right ahead, Tony.
So, similar issues, and then an extension of the parking for this office complex. So you kind of got this M, right? So if we're going to vacate or do something down here for the residences, you have a similar situation existing here.
Well, is it?
Yeah, so
Yes, yeah.
you can see the 408 building.
building goes in.
And just the south of that one is another building that's 406 Bluff Street, if I'm reading the map right. And they have, west edge of the building is 0.2 feet into the promenade. The deck is 5 feet into the promenade. Stairs are 9 feet into the promenade. Short divider fence, decorative landscaping, sign, and parking. So, you can see the cars parked perpendicular to, what is that, 4th Street or 5th Street? No, actually down on the
South a
other
little,
side.
yeah.
Those cars there, there's that one out on the promenade, and if you look at the material, you can kind of see the little decorative fence and parking area that's used.
But similar with the access way, acting as a visual barrier.
And then you've got 408 just to the north of it that has the building located at 408, extends 5.3 feet into the promenade. Also surfaced and used for access and parking. So you can see the car parked up there on the promenade.
What?
Could have taken these pictures in winter, that might have been nice. Oh, there we go. Ask and you shall receive.
Yeah.
So you can see a little bit of the park, the prop building out on both 406 and 408. And significant landscaping and vehicles parked. You can even see that little plot of land on 406 heading southeast with a little white fence. Nope, there you go, right there.
Yep. I say that the fence gets removed, the signage gets put on their building, and they find an agreement for the deck and the stairs.
So we're not going to vacate this section?
So we're talking about property number 5 still.
I'm talking about number 7. I didn't know we were talking about number 5. Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't any.
Well, I
I
guess-
don't have a problem with your solution there. I'm not sure, for me, it applies all the way up the street.
Okay.
Okay, so
So for 302, which is number 5.
Right.
So can we go back south to the very beginning? Right there, 302, yep. So this is where we were talking about vacating between the road and the tax lot of 302.
Right.
And we would come up with something to leave ourselves enough room.
Right.
That if we got to get in there and do work to the road, we don't have to go get easements and whatnot. We'll probably leave 5 foot,
To the
something,
paved section. We're not calling it a road.
to the paved section. So then the same would apply for 306 that we would use for 305.
Yep.
And then 311,
I don't know about, which one, you said 306?
yeah, the one right next to it.
Okay, yeah, I'd like the trash and the trailer removed.
Okay. Well, I guess we're talking about vacating and giving them the property that then they can do with whatever they would like to, as if it's, because it'll be their front yard.
Well,
It'll be their property.
I'm not supportive of that.
We gotta be consistent on
Well, I
those
understand.
blocks, and I don't know how you,
But I mean, that's a lot of property. I mean, in that area, it's kind of hard to see where the road is and where all the stuff is.
then we take the road out. I don't know how else to do it, as long as.
The paved.
Well, right, but I mean, placing it there made a clear decision, we've given up that part of the park, and we put a road in. If we didn't want to do that, we couldn't have, we didn't have to do it,
Well,
we could have
there's
just
there's
taken
some
it out.
there's some interesting code compliance issues that need to be dealt with, because it's the trash is just not acceptable. Period. Whether we own it, they own it. It's just not acceptable.
Yeah, but whether it's their property or
we're
it's
not
our
talking about
property, that's a code enforcement issue.
Yeah, well, that's what I said, that part of it is code, because it shouldn't be looking trashy.
But you can't take one house and say, we're gonna give you your
Well,
front
how
yard,
much-
and the other house you're not,
How
and so
much,
you can't. It's
how
all
much
or
property
nothing.
is that? I mean, we're starting to talk about some substantial pieces of,
So it's approximately,
and again, because we've had no response,
so if I just shoot a line from roughly the edge of that car to that, it's about 27 feet, so 30 feet. Somewhere 25, 30 feet, we'll subtract some.
If they begin paying the property taxes for it, then as far as I'm concerned, they can do what, they can have their trash where they want.
well, but they can't have their trash where they want. The cans may be one thing, there's other trash. It's not just trash cans.
I think we got 2 things going on
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, we have to.
Right, one is, I mean, when we've gone out there, right? It was to look at what they were doing on the public property, right?
Right.
Staircase comes down, there was a fence, looks like either maybe for a small dog or children, there was stuff.
Lots of stuff.
I know, but it's not I have seen what we do code enforcement on for garbage in yards. I'm not sure we might not like it, that people are putting stuff in their front yard. I'm not sure, we'll be happy to talk to code. I'm not sure it qualifies as a bunch of junk in the front yard. Really, what do we want to do with this space?
Okay, you've got a consensus from the others. Let's move on.
So I was also just going to say, I didn't know that prior to myself joining the commission, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys went out to look.
We did a walk along.
Right, did a walk. But during that time, the focus of that was to just identify the structures that encroached on the property.
Because there were so many differences.
And I'm wondering that now that we are kind of like vacating properties on the table, I'm wondering if it warrants, just throwing it out there, like looking at it through a different lens of looking at it saying, hey, we're not just looking at, hey, this deck, this stairway, this rock wall, whatever's encroaching on the property. We're actually talking about vacating this property and getting an actual visual for what that would look like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just putting that out there if that's
Yeah, we can accommodate that for, 302, 306.
Sure.
311. Probably circling back then to the next block, 406, 408, up to 421. It's kind of like a 2-block little walk right there. We could go have a look at.
To me, the other option is we don't vacate it and then we move that road and we right down the line of that, or we take the road out. So we take the road out, then we get our park back. But you're gonna have everyone saying, hey, we had the ability to get to the front of our house through that roadway forever, that paved area. How are we gonna take that back now?
Well, it's not taking it back if it's already ours.
I understand, but
I see what you're saying.
It's taking it back for the proportion of the park. Right now, it's not being used as a park, that strip.
So I do have a question though. So these properties that we're talking about, it's vacation that's on the table, and if so, granted, I know the commission may want to look at it again, but who's paying for all of the costs that come with that?
Well, I don't think it's entirely our responsibility.
Well, I think we paved it, we own it. We paved it, we made the mistake. And if somebody made a bad decision at some point, we live with it.
I don't totally agree with that, but. Michael?
I'm starting to have a problem with vacating fairly substantial chunks of property. But I get the point, but it's, we built the street there and cut it off.
Oh, not a street, remember?
We paved a portion of the park.
Probably for access.
There's another issue related to the vacation that, with a public comment letter that we received today, that I think we need to get legal clarification on that. Because if a vacation and adding square footage to people's property is going to affect their income tax, property tax.
That's a question that needs to be answered by the assessors. It's not our question to answer.
But I think it makes a difference on whether or not we would force a vacation on somebody.
Well, as I am aware, the assessor's office doesn't do a lot of residential reassessments unless they've coming off the National Register and the property value goes back up, or there's a major addition or some sort of major thing on the particular house. They really focus a lot on industrial, commercial, tenant improvements, new construction, that sort of thing.
We can reach out to the tax assessor and ask them, if we were to dedicate or vacate let's just say it's 30 by 50, so, 1,500 square foot of public land to a private property owner, what would happen from the tax assessor standpoint?
Yeah.
Because typically, so we send building permits every month to the tax assessor. And I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, there's a threshold as to when your value gets reassessed. So your house has an assessed value of, you have a market value of 500,000, you have an assessed value of 300,000, right? You do an addition. That addition, depending on the size, might not trigger a reassessment of your assessed value. Let's say it does. Only the portion of the home that was increases. So, it's 50% increase, right? So 50% gets this new assessed value, the other 50 is at the other one, and they combine the two. Yes, I know. It is. So I'm not sure what would happen, because the land value, right? You got a land value, you've got a building value, you've got a real market value, and then you've got an assessed value. I just don't know. We're not appraising this. We're essentially vacating it. It's not like it's a sale, but we'd be happy to reach out and just see what they have to say.
I would just ask the assessors.
If they don't want to move forward with the vacation though, some of these people are the ones who were refusing to sign the license. So it puts us in a position where we have to choose one.
Right. So we
Not
will
to throw
choose
a wrench
one.
in it, but what do we gain from a vacation as opposed to just sending the acknowledgement letter?
I'm not picking one here. These are the options available.
I don't support the acknowledgement letter unless they sign it. Because what does it mean?
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah, we have
But even if they sign it, that doesn't do anything about when it changes
hands, yeah.
No, it doesn't.
And then we're in the same situation when somebody goes, well, nobody told me about it.
So for me, to answer your question, it would be closure. It would be the idea of it's kind of settled and done.
The vacation gets us out of the mess
Yeah,
until
and
they
then
build the next.
Okay.
No, he's saying if he vacates.
What I'm saying is vacating brings closure when appropriate versus a letter. A letter doesn't bring closure.
No.
It's just kind of like a limbo standstill until there's a new owner, until something changes, right? So I was answering what does vacation offer that the letter doesn't?
Good point. Thank you.
So we'll reach out to the tax assessor and schedule just a walkabout if anybody wants to go, or we could take each person, individually and walk, whatever. We gotta do it as a group.
Let's just set up a time for those extra ones that we have to deal with.
Okay, so that would be 302, 306, and 311. And then
Can the math come back?
The next little section there, the 406, 408, 421.
Kevin, can you bring the map back up again? So I guess my question is, even though there's no encroachment, what do we do about 315? Which is a big chunk of property.
Well, I think maybe that's the point of maybe walking out there. Like we have no issue. It's still, grass, landscaping.
Just got a text from somebody, but I don't know who it is.
That's kind of feels like it's still part of the park, even though it's on the other side of the road.
And it's bigger, okay, all right. I'm just thinking in terms of fairness, your next door neighbor, we're giving them that land and this.
They're not really using it for anything. They've stayed on their property.
Just bringing it up.
Yeah, we don't
Well, and I do wonder.
We don't have any issues with 315.
And I do wonder, like 311, right? Like if we were to go straight from the property line towards the river, like does it need to be all of that?
No.
Right?
I would
It
not
could
give
be a
that up.
smaller section. We could tailor it to
And
where
how
the,
that ties in with the next piece.
right, make it transition a little better because that road gets closer to the actual walkway along the old rock wall there.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
maybe we delineate an area
Maintain some width.
and say, we're willing to give you this to park in. The rest of this, somehow we're going to delineate as, this is park staff,
Well, yes, that piece is more consistent with the other properties.
Right.
Yeah, I think that would be good to walk through that again to see how open that is. I forget when you get into that section how.
Close it gets, it changes a little bit. All right, so
Okay.
then we're doing the same on the next section, I believe.
There's 3, right?
Yes.
There.
And then the office building where it has the parking, the diagonal parking extending into that little section right there.
Oh, we should probably eliminate that.
Okay, so we'll take a walk out there and then we can come back and have that discussion. All right, what are we on to after 421? What number are we up to?
I just want to point out, 421 is not in this list.
Oh, is the parking?
No.
No. Okay.
I just wanted to point that out. And then,
It can't be added, but.
yeah, just wanted to point that out. The next one on the list, so again, we're scheduling a walkthrough to look at 302, 306, 311, 406, 408.
Okay, so we're going to go out and look at
So then,
number 6, number 7, number 8, is that what you're saying?
yeah,
Okay.
correct. 5, 6, 7, 8. And then moving on tonight, right now, you'd be looking at number 9, which is 503 High Street.
Okay, so number 9. This is obvious, this is the Ladderette house.
Ladderette house, yeah.
Have they responded at all?
So I have been in somewhat frequent contact with him. I actually did go and meet him on site. I had thought he was going to submit something for tonight, but he didn't.
Okay.
So I'm not really sure where that stands. I think he had expressed some concern that there were some concrete portions, like a porch that was concrete, some other things that would be really difficult to ever move. Other than that, unfortunately, I don't have a specific ask here tonight because I didn't get one.
I think that we need to get an agreement so that the landscaping can stay. I mean, it's been there, as far as I know, as long as I've lived here.
So happy to send the encroachment agreement back to him. Just as an FYI, he is one of the property owners that was refusing to sign because of the indemnity language. So I'm just throwing that out there. We can certainly send it back to him, but that's kind of been his stance thus far.
So, Bill, on your original advice, taking out the indemnity agreement causes what for us? I'm concerned about the property owner, but I'm concerned about what it can do negatively for us.
So in most cases, when, what would happen in this case, somebody gets injured on the property and then they sue. Typically, they look to, cities or counties because they're deep pockets. They've got insurance rather than homeowners. And this would just have, if they are making improvements to city property, they would cover their insurance or they would cover whatever the damages that were assessed against the city. There is an ongoing battle between the trial lawyers and the state.
I was just going to ask.
Of course there is. Why would there not be?
About, recreational immunity, whether there's a statute that tries to give public entities that allow, and private entities that allow people to come onto the property at no charge immunity, and every time they write it, the trial lawyers find some clever way to get around it, and there's another effort in the House, in the legislature this year, so it may well be that it ends up not doing very much if in fact we can get the recreational immunity ever figured out. But of course, there's also the intentional, if somebody is not happy about dogs coming in and doing their business on their landscaping and sets up some type of booby trap, and it's on public property and somebody sues the city because there's public, there's a booby trap and, that would not be subject to recreational immunity because it is intentional. And this would be one more way to make sure the property owner is is the one that pays damages and not the city. We could certainly third party that person in and sue them that way, but yeah, it just is a cleaner way of taking on the who's responsible when somebody gets hurt on the property.
I would say walking by, I don't think anybody assumes these are open to the public.
Well, once again,
I
do, because
I live close to the
I do tours of McLoughlin Promenade, and I walk right up that right up that walkway,
I mean, I think there's literally a sign
and I
that
walk
says
onto the
private
part that I
property.
know that's the promenade. And this was well before I knew all this.
So I don't know about a sign, but
I've gone that far.
prior to these meetings and myself walking on the promenade, I absolutely assumed that was all private property.
Yeah. And I have prior knowledge from working for the city. I knew it wasn't, so.
Yeah.
Totally, and I would
just
argue.
walk right, I say, don't go any
Essentially,
further
every
than
other
this.
resident of Oregon City would assume if they're walking on the promenade that this is private property.
Yeah.
So we've got the structural encroachment, which we can deal with. We have this design use perception issue that's a little bit different. I'm honestly not sure how you rectify that. Like removal, vacation, is the other extreme.
That's a lot of park property.
Put up a sign, call it the Lotterette Gardens at
There you
the
go.
promenade,
Well, and-
open to the public.
To equate this to the other section, they put those landscapings there, they put those paths
I
there.
agree, yeah.
We put the paved roadway there. It's totally different.
Yeah, it is different. Well, I would think that they would want to be protected in some way.
Yeah. A lot of work there. It's beautiful.
It's not totally in keeping with the landscape of the promenade, but it goes with the house.
Yeah.
It's not,
Well, I'm going to go back to fairness again. If we're going to allow this, then what about those rock walls on the other ones that we said had to come out? Why did those have to come out if this doesn't have to get changed?
those rock walls were put in within the last 3 to 4 years. They're not, it's not the same as this at all.
In what way?
They went out, picked up the rocks, put them there to say, oh, this is my property.
I guess I see this similar to the way I see the difference between a shed that isn't on a foundation versus an entire patio and a deck. Is how I see it. I don't think that they're the same.
Well, let's move on to number 10.
Sorry, I still need some consensus here though from.
Well, we
you all.
don't have one.
Okay, so this one's being ignored for the moment?
Well,
What
we're
are
gonna,
we?
when we're out there, we'll look at it
I was
too.
going to say, can we just, maybe I can walk through it now that I
That's
know it's
right, we can
public
walk through
property,
it,
and we
yes. We can definitely
I
walk
would
through
like
it.
to walk,
Right,
I've
and-
walked partway down that path, not all the way into where you're talking.
I know where their property line is, I don't go there.
Yeah, well, as long as you don't go within the wall of the house you stayed in that
I
line.
I just stay on the side.
Yep.
I don't go around the front of it. Okay, number 10. We've pretty much got that one resolved.
Vacate.
Which one?
This is 515 High. It's the foundation, they're willing to pay for the vacation of
Oh,
that.
that's the one that sits way up, right?
This is the
Oh, no.
That's
Are you
0.6 feet.
Okay, 515.
Yeah, I can't, sorry,
Part of the building, yeah.
I can't think of the name of the house, but
Yeah.
she's next to Ron Tom's house, which is also a Lateran house.
Was there landscaping? Didn't they have sprinkles in the promenade and a same kind of a court, a decorated landscape area?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so.
So the house component, we can address.
Right.
When we take the walk, I'm assuming, we look at that one as
It's sort of up a
tied
little
to
bit
the
of a
next
slope.
one. Yeah.
So all of that's in the vacation, are you saying, or are you saying you want more?
I think it sounds like we're open to vacating to address the
House
foundation
issue.
encroachment.
Right.
We're going to walk out there to have a look at the landscaping where they put in sprinkling into the promenade and this feeling of private versus public.
Yeah.
That's similar to the discussion for the house adjacent and try to figure out how to address that. Okay.
Oh, boy. These,
So we're on number 11.
Yep.
Okay, so what we have is trailer storage, boat storage, and vehicle storage.
I think we walked,
We walked that.
this is a very unique
yeah.
design. Is this the original cottage clusters that we were going back to here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's some topography change between High Street and it does have a name here as South Bluff Street.
But it's still
For access into 110,
Isn't
112, but
right-of-way,
it's not
so
right of way.
Nope, it is not.
I believe we have elderly gentleman has some material there that's stored.
He has a boat.
Boat. Are we willing to wait until moves out, or?
And when is that going to be?
I don't have that answer.
He's
Yeah.
lived there for over 20 years.
Yeah,
according
it's,
to the
it's,
current property
it's
owner.
goes. I'm not willing to gamble on a guarantee that they're going to move. It goes.
The boat or the vehicles, or both?
Trailer storage, boat storage, vehicle storage.
Well, but I mean, they're using the front for parking, just like the ones down the street.
Well, that's not storage, though, that's parking.
Okay, so we're differentiating. Okay.
Wait a minute.
Parking overnight, 2 nights?
Storage to me is it's probably something that's been sitting there, it's inoperable, that's why it's
I
there.
get that with the boat, but how do we know that about the vehicles?
Well, I'm just going by what it says on the paper. I remember I walked back there and looked at it. There's got to be some right of access on the promenade that they're, I've walked back there too, so. It looks like people's backyards, but it is not people's backyards. It's pretty rough beyond the boat, let me tell you that.
Yeah, it's a lot of blackberry in
A
there.
lot of blackberries and stuff, and so I walked on one side, then I walked back the other side. That's when I lost you guys for a while. You guys were way ahead of me, and I was still hanging out back there.
So we have this situation a little bit different from before, where we had the access way and people were parking between their property line and the access way. So we're looking at considering vacating, right? This is a parking area in the front that is on the promenade.
And it's, below it is the VFW with that slope.
Correct.
Is that paved?
No, it's rock.
It's pretty
Crushed,
rough.
yeah.
It's really rough.
Yeah.
So my assumption is we put the road in there.
So we need the pavement area. It's not paved. It's a,
No, I know, it's gravel.
Let's see. how far
so there
back?
needs to be some
2005
acknowledgement that we
it
will
was
allow them to
there.
park there, but They need to let us off the hook.
Bill, is there a way that we just say this is a parking area? Like, I don't think we want to vacate all that.
No, we
Right.
don't.
So, you know, just like we have the paved portion of the promenade and there are parking areas and parks for people to access them, you know, we could make it a public parking area and it's like parking on a street. The people
If
who.
they park there first or someone else, anyone can park
Yeah,
there.
yeah, but it's less likely any public will even realize that that's there, other than the people who live there.
But we can post it.
Yeah,
Scott and I are going to go park there.
Is there not a right of way in between, like here at all? I mean,
It
is that?
stops. See where the water
Yeah,
tank
Yeah,
is?
that
Just to the
belongs to
right
the
of it,
red
you see the
rod.
red line?
yeah.
So that's
that's right of way.
that's the right of way. That's the end of the right of way. So just to the north of
Okay,
the,
but that is right away all the way to right to the edge of
Yes, it's all the way to the red line. That
Yeah,
is, that's the legal deeded
That's
street.
First Street. That is dedicated First Street.
Street, yeah, that's a street. Otherwise, they would have no access.
All of that, yes, okay,
This is all park.
okay,
See the road?
yeah. Okay, but that middle section is all straight.
But given where
Yeah.
the rock and gravel is,
Yeah.
that doesn't appear like typical, you know, street
Right.
opened by the city as much as somebody driving around the backside that sort of became more.
And then you see the
accepted.
stairs, Rocky,
The
that go
stairs,
down.
Yeah.
I mean, we got 99,
Okay,
we
so
got cars parked there.
I like the public parking idea, so long as we post it. I'm assuming that would preclude the boat from being able to stay there, though.
Yep.
And as far as I'm concerned, the boat can encroach on another city park, which is Warcraft Marina, and they can do that.
Okay,
Yeah, so the cars can stay and the boat goes. That seems like
Yep.
a good compromise.
Okay, so I think there was a note about, so just basically no storage, no boat storage, no trailer storage. Vehicles are fine because we're going to say it's a
right.
public
Unless-
parking.
Unless they end up staying there for too long.
Okay. And then in this particular instance, once we designate the parking public, are there any other agreements we need with these property owners in terms of, or is it just if they don't remove these items, they go to code enforcement?
Right.
Well, and so I don't know how long the cars are parking there, but if there's a car that's being stored there and it's public parking.
That's a different
then that would be-
story.
We'd have to
If
go
it's
check and
somebody-
monitor.
Yeah, if somebody's using it for access to the back of their house, that's how they go. That's different. Parking is different than long-term, like, oh, my car doesn't run, so I'm going to just park this car here.
Parking is subject to park hours. Same as the VFW parking lot.
Well, unless
10
it's post,
o'clock.
if it's post, oh, the park?
Yeah,
Yeah.
can people public park back there overnight?
Yeah, that's 10 o'clock. You wouldn't be able to park overnight.
I mean, can't
I
you
mean-
just say overnight parking permitted? Like,
Well, that
We
has a
could,
whole.
we could make it residential parking.
Parking
give them-
only,
Give them a
yeah.
permit to throw in their
Yeah.
window that says they can
Yeah.
stay there
Yeah.
24/7.
Because if
I mean,
you say
the-
overnight parking, you're going to have somebody drop off their
Right.
truck and trailer.
I mean,
All right, that's fair.
realistically, we don't have to make it public parking. You know, the idea is that you cannot use the promenade in a dedicated property in a way that's foreign to its dedication. So you could allow somebody to park there temporary because it doesn't interfere with its use as a dedication. People can move them on and off, and they will. You know, it is essentially, if you allow, you know, 2, 4, whatever the number of houses are, you're kind of giving them exclusive use of
As opposed to the
of
rest of the
private
public.
property. You know, if that is something you're considering doing, you know, you might consider charging a fee for using the parking area.
That's true.
Okay, so we're generally fine coming up with a way to allow these folks to park here
Residentially.
without signing a license agreement, without vacating. So we'll have to just come up with something that passes.
But the trailer and boat storage.
Right, all that stuff, yeah, just all
That's gotta go.
the debris, the storage, all
Yeah,
that. This
that's
is
gotta
just
go.
for working vehicle parking to access those homes. Okay?
yeah, and I highlight working vehicle
Sure.
parking.
What's this one?
This is basically, the house is actually accessed from High Street, and this is number 13?
12.
Oh, 12, okay, sorry, skip 12.
You can see the parking area where they can park.
Yeah. That is a new house, a newer house. When we were doing our tour, see that little curved pathway that kind of runs there? They were just starting to lay that, and there's still a bunch of those pavers back there that they look like they intended to pave the area that goes to the left there, that area. And you can still see in the picture you took, there's those blocks still sitting there. So I don't know whether they've done any more work, but again, that's not a house that just been there for 100 years. That was built recently.
It's also been landscaped, and there's irrigation from the house out to the landscaped area.
Yep.
Promenade.
Yeah, and again, you know, somebody taking public property as their property. I actually remember when this went through historic review, because there was a question came up at the hearing about how close it was to the promenade.
So my concern with this one, like we've had with a couple others, is that like insinuation that like this is private property when it's not. Yeah.
It's a little bit difficult to access the promenade from that location, but if you scoot the aerial down a little bit to where 123 is, kind of, yeah, there you go.
So
There's some big rock outcroppings and stuff, so you can climb up in there. I mean, kids do it all the time. You can walk back there
This
and
is the back
go
side
to
of
the
the
street.
Cayuse 5 Memorial.
I think there was an issue about that access way, whether it was a public access way.
Right, that's what I'm asking. Is that
From
a alleyway or is that a
It's-
driveway?
It's very narrow. I believe that came up at the hearing as well,
I mean, if that's,
because it's a public
It
right.
says
I believe it's a public right of
It's
way.
showing as public.
It's a
it
public
says
right of way.
Promenade Street.
Yeah, it's a public right of way.
So that's, wow. I mean, because essentially that's a sidewalk connection to the promenade, is what it is. And they are using it as a driveway.
Yeah, they're using it as their access because the thing that came up at the hearing was the city wasn't going to allow them to build that house because there was no access to a public street. Then the research was done to show that Promenade was actually a public right-of-way, so they had access. Because you know, it's not a private easement or anything, so I think it was, you know, determining what the front, you know, what was the front yard, what was the side yard, was, you know, where's the street, all of that.
Wow.
Well, I think the hard part too is I think that
Where's the planter bed?
the front access is kind of onto the promenade again, like some of these
Mm-hmm.
other homes.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Do you remember where the planter bed is, Alex, on this one?
It's-
Description that says that
Isn't it?
the landscaping to the west of the parking area and
Isn't that
entirely
it?
of the promenade has drip irrigation to the planter bed area, so I would assume,
So it's in that area?
I would think closer to the house, but, you know, this might.
Okay, I think it's like there. Did we have any contact with them at all? Okay, I think I remember they might have come to one of the meetings. Oh, and then you're showing the, yeah, there's the other, where's that other, you get to the other picture here. I can blow that up. Oh, no, we can't blow it up. Dang, nope, can't blow it up. Well, I'm not sure why they would have gone ahead and put drip irrigation in. Again, newer property. I've been there for 100 years. Or a million years, even if it had been. What's your pleasure?
Looks like they finished their pavers there.
So this is another one I'd like to see it. And also just kind of my gut is saying, can't have anything in the promenade.
Maybe the people with all those pots could give them some of the pots. They could have that on their walkway.
So,
I'm not inclined to allow for the landscaping to be there. Like I said, this is a new property. This is not something that,
How we ever let a house be built like that, I have no idea.
I think
It's crazy.
I think that's the side yard because it's addressed on Promenade. So the front yard of the house is where you see that, that's the front. So that's a side yard, and I believe you can be 5 feet from the property line. And then you've got the rear yard, yeah. They have
I believe.
So you mean down where it says
property,
117?
Parking area and, possibly a garage even on that,
yeah, there's a garage.
right?
It's right there off of,
the P.
Yeah.
right, so they should,
Yep.
so technically, that's, right. Yeah.
Want to have a look at this one again? Or?
Yep. we're gonna have to walk in
Yeah,
again,
we
but-
walked up there, I recall. We were all on city property, so we weren't encroaching.
Little street.
Just trying to find the plan.
Well, so I'm looking at a different aerial map, and it looks like that area, that gravel-looking area, has been like developed on this one.
It wasn't always like that.
No, I believe you 100%. What I'm saying is, it looks like there's actually been more development
Yeah.
since this was
Oh, yeah.
taken.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, I would agree. That's why I said we needed to put the kibosh on them, putting those,
What is that?
Oh,
those,
yeah, that's what it
those
looks like
paver
right there.
things down there, because
Yeah.
that may be those pavers, and
Oh, geez.
that's gotta come out. Sorry. It's not your property. You can see the car there where the
Because
driveway
those
is.
weren't complete when we walked it last time, I don't think.
Those,
was it?
they were not there. The picture you see, those things were sitting there in the driveway.
Oh, my God.
In that area, like they were getting ready to do it. And I said, we need to put the kibosh on that.
Sometime between when we took the spring leaf off
Yeah.
photo and the summer 2024 photo.
Oh,
Yeah.
That
man.
happened pretty quick.
That's
Yep.
a lot.
Yeah, so I'm very sorry, folks, but nope.
Okay,
Didn't-
so site visit on
Didn't come and ask.
Yep.
13,
Yeah.
311 high.
Okay, can we get the aerial?
What? Oh. I think he's just mumbling.
Can we see 311 high?
I totally messed this thing up.
Let's get to it.
Okay, here we go.
There's the
That's number
the wrong way.
13.
That one in the middle. That's
Oh,
the third
okay.
there. So we've already kind of talked through this.
Oh, we did, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, we already talked about that one.
But they also have, again, just for disclosure, I do know them, that they do have access on the street, on High Street.
So this is the group that we're going to go have a look at?
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so 14
yeah. The comment I got was,
should be,
they would be open discussing the cost of vacating the parking area between our property and the paved path. But that's a lot of property. So we'll go look at it again. This one makes me cranky.
Yeah. This was,
So, I don't know, what is this, Alex? What is this one? This is mostly
14.
landscaping?
Yeah, it's rock wall and landscaping.
Landscaping or rock walls.
So if I remember right, there's very little way to access other than this property. Sorry, very little access to this area. You've got steep walls running down to the road to the south and west, and the rock to the north, and so 127 is really the only people who have access to this area.
Is this not right away?
It is right away.
So that's your
So
access.
that's your access to that part of the park?
Again, this is a newer house. This is not an old house.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's what that's there for, is to access that part of the park.
I guess my access is more topographical.
No, I understand. I'd like to walk. We kind of walked.
It's a little rough through there.
We didn't walk up there
Yeah,
because
we
we
went
didn't
back
go
there.
through that way, but if we went through a right of way, I mean, I'm sure there's a connection there that's not, I don't know, I'd want to walk it.
Well, and I think
I'd like to see
just to the north where you've got 116, 114, 112, 113, we were just talking about those, right? I think the big visual barrier there and physical barrier is the blackberries that
Yeah.
run along there that kind of separate this little piece
They
from,
got an electric weed whacker that
To the
runs
north.
on a battery pack.
I'm sure the Parks Department does.
We'll
But I
just-
mean, with those things, and I guess the reason I'm, concerned about those type of pieces is because whether it's that accessible or not now is one thing, but
It could be.
a trail connection from, Waterboard Park to South First Street that takes us to the Center Street property that takes us to the Bluff. I mean, those are things we gotta think about. And they may not be, like putting a pathway through there someday is something we need to think about, those connections. Even if it is just as wide as a, 5-foot path that goes through there at some point.
okay?
Properties 15 and 16, they both signed the encroachment license agreement.
Then we don't need to deal with it.
Right.
Okay, 17.
Yes, there's a letter attached for this particular
Yeah, this is
property owner.
Bill Daniels' old house. He lived there for 40 years, so I'm assuming he may be been the one that put some of the landscaping in, but, this is also the house that had a fire in that area, and the fire department had to come. They were burning something, leaves and brush and whatnot.
There's another one of those. It's pretty tight as you're walking from the elevator south.
Yeah, there's.
Hard to tell.
Very steep there.
What's,
The house itself is not encroaching.
correct.
Right.
They're requesting lot line. We've kind of talked about that, so I don't know if this is one where we consider vacation or,
Without a structure encroaching, I'm not inclined to look at vacation.
okay.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
So in that instance, is the encroachment license agreement still the preferred method?
The landscaping is, there's some roadies in there and stuff like that. I know that I'm kind of trying to remember I think in the picture, the second picture shows where the rocks go along there. So what is she saying here? So she's saying that removing the historic retaining walls I'm not sure that our those rocks along there aren't the retaining wall, that little rock area.
I think those are the retaining walls that they're talking about, the historic
Yeah, this right
retaining
here.
walls.
Yeah, that's not the retaining wall. She must be talking about up closer to near the house.
Maybe.
Sure.
I don't know if we have,
If you look at the picture on the right, it does look like there are some rock retaining walls higher up, closer to the house.
that's what I'm saying, higher up closer to the house, where those rocks are, that's not the retaining wall.
Yeah.
So I don't think, like I said, lot line's not really an option.
Right.
We're into the license agreement. If vacation's not,
Yeah, I'm not supportive of a vacation there either. We'll be walking by it. We can look at those retaining walls.
So add this to the list to look at.
Yeah, I'd like to get clarity on what is being referred to as a retaining wall, because I would prefer to remain consistent to what I had said previously, which is that I wanted someone
the
to
rocks.
remove some of their rocks for the demarcation, so.
There's a slope there, so I mean, the public's not going to be walking up there.
okay?
Yeah, I think if we walk, 'cause there is a difference between rocks to try to close off an area versus a retaining wall that's keeping the hillside from coming down.
I don't have any issue with the retaining wall. The other,
Yeah,
she's
I think we
talking
need to
here
see it.
about the ivy overgrowth. Well, that was planted long before she moved there, and long before the Daniels lived there.
Okay. All right, we will work on site visit.
No rain,
We got
please.
through them all.
If
No
we have
what?
to, I said, please not on a rainy day, because I don't want to be crawling
We
through
didn't really
blackberry
get
bushes
through
on a
them all,
rainy
but-
day.
We got direction
We
on
went
some.
through them all.
I know.
The next time this comes to us, can we get like a summary of all the decisions that were made?
Yeah, outlining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
What we
Yeah, well,
decided
yeah.
tonight.
Do you just mean the
Well,
ones,
we all came to consensus.
the one that you,
Right.
that you did
There you
go.
give direction on?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, so just like this document says current status, I'll just
Yes.
update the status to say this meeting, the instructions were
I think we made it messier than it was.
What did we decide? I'm pretty sure
I
they're
don't know.
watching. What did we
We're getting
talk
there,
about
but-
with 311? All they use that back there is for
You just said a
parking.
site visit.
Okay.
Someday it'll be a park.
And there,
So hopefully someday soon.
this wasn't the one where their fence was encroaching. That was somebody else. I think their fence is where their fence is supposed to be. 311. Yeah. You just have parking.
No, 311 was the parking, I think,
Yeah.
primarily.
There was somebody else that had a fence, and we have an agreement from
Yeah,
them.
access and parking was the primary use for 311.
Yeah.
Bill, can I ask you a question? I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. When it comes back to that liability question, as a practical matter, won't the insurance companies duke it out? Kind of regardless of whether there's a liability?
Whether there's indemnity provisions or not.
Thanks, that's the word I was looking for.
Yes, ultimately it comes down to insurance companies duking it out. There is at least some reports from some of the people that their homeowners insurance would not extend they were told that their homeowners policy wouldn't include that area off of their property, so they'd have to get a separate policy for that. So in that case, it wouldn't be insurers duking it out. And in those types of situations, what tends to happen is settlement with that person for a relatively minor amount, and the bulk comes after the city. And then, if the indemnity provision is there, the city could then go back to the homeowner. So it changes the calculus if the indemnity is there.
I did a little research on my own on that particular issue, Mike, and I think it depends entirely on the insurance company, because I asked my insurer whether if I did something like that, and I just took something minor, and my insurance will cover it. It would be part of my homeowner's policy. I didn't have to do a separate, but again, it depends. I said, well, he said some won't, some will.
Right, that was when we looked into it a little bit, that was our understanding as well. Some insurance companies are, that's fine, it's part of covered on your policy, and others are more sticklers, so.
So, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. They're just saying that
Yeah, and even those that say it's not under your homeowner's insurance policy, you can usually get an additional,
right.
I know the term, but an add-on.
Not a rider.
cover.
You mean a rider?
A rider tends to run the opposite way.
Right, okay, yeah.
It's
a short-term thing.
Yeah, so there's a term for it. It can be done. It just increases the cost of insurance.
Yeah.
It can.
Okay. Well, what's your pleasure? We have reports from the commission, committee report. Oh, excuse me, we have update on city projects, future work session items. Okay, let's get that.
Okay, thank
Number
you.
3.
So for April 8th, we have tentatively scheduled a joint work session with the Board of County Commissioners that we'll be hosting here. The dates seem to work and the times seem to work, just confirming commissioners' availability. So county staff is working on that. We're also going to bring forward for some direction as part of the I&I program that we're doing. We have to do some work in a charter park, so we just want to have a discussion with the commission about, that work that'll be essentially, we got to dig it up, but it'll be underground, won't impact the use of the park, how to move forward on that. And then we're tentatively hoping to get the final applications and interviews for the DMMO that we're renoticing right now based on the last meeting.
I've put out some word I've asked the Downtown Association to retail. I've talked to some people in the arts community. And what was the other? Agritourism. I have not done that. I've not reached out to some of our agri-tourism folks that are nearby. So I need to put that on my list.
Yeah, and I know Mr. Graham has reached out as well to similar organizations.
Okay. I need to contact my winery buddies.
Okay, any questions on future work session items?
That's on the 8th.
April, yes.
Sorry.
Our regular.
That's on the 8th.
Correct.
Got it.
Okay. Provided you the update. I did add Public Works work for Center Street. We currently have that contract. They're preparing preliminary yard layouts and cost estimates to remove the decant facility up to Mountain View Reservoir, as well as move our winter response materials, rock, de-icer from Mountain View to First Street. So continue to move forward on that. Not a lot with the other ones. If you want me to go through them, I can,
No.
or if you've read them and have questions, please let me know.
Nope.
Okay, great, thank you.
By the way, there will be a test just for you.
Okay, maybe you do need to go through, but there's going to be an exam.
I'll make sure I call you. I'll bring you up to speed.
Okay, does anybody want to do 5?
I can give a quick update.
Okay.
Well, so I figure you might just have some interest. I did have a meeting with the Homeless Solutions
Coalition of
Clackamas County. Thank you very much. And they just kind of provided some updates that I thought you guys might want to know. So as I'm sure you've seen, the Miles Fiberglass building is gone.
Wow.
They're looking at a groundbreaking for the new building May, June, somewhere around there.
Wow.
They don't have a date yet, but they are looking at also hosting some kind of like public sessions to just invite folks to come in and understand what it is exactly that they're doing. So yeah, just want to throw that out there.
Anybody else?
I just have a request. If we could get our actual committee assignments listed underneath here like we had in the past. I don't know when we stopped doing that, but that's helpful for when I'm making my list of things that I'm going to share, so.
They also need to be updated on the city website.
Okay,
Yeah, because they're not updated on the city's website.
okay.
I thought we were listed.
Not on here.
Not on. Oh, well, I have the agenda. They're all listed.
I think it's just, I think there's a little bit of a difference between what gets posted on the website and what shows up
So those do show up on the agenda. I don't know why it's not showing up
Will-
on the It's a formatting issue. That
I don't have it up, he does.
fix before
Here.
the next
See,
work session.
It's not,
It's on the agenda,
So
but it's
the
not.
actual-
yeah, it's on the agenda, it's not on the
Yeah,
agenda
it's-
packet.
It's just-
Right.
There's a different, okay. We'll look into that.
You have to go into-
It's-
yeah.
It shows up on the view.
Yeah,
But you guys don't have access to that on the iPad.
that's why I always
Okay.
have this, because I remember that.
Yeah, can get into the formatting for that, fix that.
Thank you. Okay, are we ready to say goodnight? I think we've done some heavy lifting tonight, and I don't know about you, but I'm following the Far Side cartoon. It's the kid in the class raises his hand, Mrs. Jones, can I go home? My brain is full.
Yeah,
So
that's how I feel.
we are adjourned.